Hey, chat, how you doing? Welcome. It is Thursday night. We got day 8 of Rocky to get into here. Sorry, chat. It took me a second working on my haircut. Got my hair done. My hair did. So we are going to get rocking and rolling here on all of this. So let's go. Yeah, you guys remember, this is, things were looking pretty good for Rocky until they found the handgun magazine stuck in his house. So, boy. But overall, things I think are still going in his favor. We'll see. And yeah, but let's get started. It's time to rock and roll, chat. It's time to rock and roll. Why is this not working? There we go. What? Check activity. Okay, no, I don't care. There we go. God, Google fucking signs me out all the fucking time now. It's getting annoying. So, here we go, though. Let's get this moving here. All right, chat. Here we go. Here we go, chat. Judge Paul Tuttle.
Okay,
Judge Tuttle's up there. Paul Senior's there. And we are going to get the banner going. Remember, the detective is on cross-examination, and they really hadn't gotten that far yet. So here we go. Why are we... Oh, this is day 7. Why is it showing day 7? I want day 8. What the heck? Why is it not giving me the right one I want? There we go. That was retarded. Anyways, here we go.
Characteristics, yes. We'll limit.
And chat, if we run out of time, we'll stop where we're at, okay? So here we go.
No parties, jurors, and counsel are present. Detective Flores is on the stand. Detective Flores, you're still under oath from when you were here last time. This is Takapina is questioning, and this is Takapina Flores.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm just going to rewind for a few questions, just to reset the context. You can start talking about the surveillance video. Okay. All right. So the sequence surveillance video overlaps video from 1616 East Del Mar with video and audio from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard, correct? Correct. All right. And you agree that 1616 East Del Mar video has no sound?
Correct.
But the video from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard does.
That's right.
So you overlap the videos from each location trying to show when the shot would have occurred during the 1616 East Del Mar video.
Correct.
Of course, we agree on this already. If your overlap is off even by a fraction of a second, the shot would not have occurred during the precise moment shown on the overlap 1616 East Del Mar.
That's right.
And in order to determine when the overlap, in order to determine when to overlap the shot heard on the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video with the 1616 East Del Mar video, you need to first figure out when that shot took place in relation to the 1616 East Del Mar video.
Yes.
So you use a visual benchmark for both videos, something that you could see in the surveillance videos from 1616 East Del Mar and 6200 Hollywood Boulevard. Correct. And that was the floodlight turning on.
Yes.
And you saw the floodlight turning on in camera 2, and just to be clear, camera 2 is file. The file number, based on these filings, was file 18221-716 from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard at 10:17 and 26 seconds. Now, but even seeing that floodlight in both videos, there would have been only 2 ways to use that benchmark to determine when to overlap the 1616 East Del Mar video and 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video at the early moment when the shot would have occurred in the 1616 East Del Mar video, correct?
I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, I got to do it.
I didn't understand.
A lot of words in that question, but I'm still learning about this. But even seeing that floodlight in both videos, when we just discussed that benchmark, that floodlight going on, right? Okay.
Is that yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
But even seeing that floodlight in both videos, there would have only been two ways to use that benchmark floodlight to determine when to overlap the 1616 Vista Del Mar video and the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard videos at the earlier moment when the shot would have occurred on the Vista Del Mar.
I'm sorry, I think you lost me, sir.
So the two videos, again, the benchmark for that was floodlight.
Correct, one of the benchmarks, yes.
What did you use to determine when to overlap the 1616 Vista Del Mar video and the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video?
Yeah, it was just the totality of the videos, looking at the sequence of the floodlight, the individuals on the video running from one point of the camera to the other, just kind of looking at it in sequence over and over. Everything seemed to coincide with the sound from the 6200 camera.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's two methods, and tell me if you use one of these two. One would have been to rewind both videos simultaneously to the exact moment, right? Or let me rephrase that, to rewind both videos, 6200, 1616, simultaneously the exact amount, 30 seconds, for example, right? Would that be one way?
That would be one way. I mean, anticipating that each individual camera system sometimes has its own time. It doesn't mean they're all automatically set at the first exact second or coincide with each other. But again, roughly looking at the light with the individual persons on those cameras, watching in sequence, it's the best way I can explain it to you.
Okay. And the other way would have been to determine how much actual time passed on the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video between the floodlight and the shot heard, and then use that same actual amount of time to rewind the 1616 Vista Del Mar video, right?
Yes, roughly.
Which of those two methodologies did you use?
I think we explored every option just to try to gauge the best possible, but I can't tell you which one I believe was more accurate than the others. Again, I just looked at the totality of all these things to see that they coincided.
Well, my question really more is, which one did you use? What kind did you do?
I mean, I look at, again, at both. I think the one that stood out more to me was the light, the flood light.
And you said, but I'm saying, did you rewind both videos, the 6200 and 1616, the exact same amount?
I don't recall whether we were running to the exact second, but to the point where it coincided with the sound. And so, yes, I mean, to answer your question, roughly yes, about the same time.
There was been once. Okay. I'm going to play you a couple clips, I'm make sure that's right. But when creating the sequence surveillance video, it wasn't an exact science, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Meaning the overlapping was done by hand, right? Correct. In fact, I think that 55 seconds into the sequence surveillance video, you can see that little cursor being moved by hand in the upper right corner. Did you see that?
I don't recall that.
All right, we'll show you.
Sure.
Which exhibit is this?
This is people 15, or we're using ARM. This is people 15 already. We'll use this one for this.
Fifteen was the thumb drive.
Okay, just switch it. Use it.
I'm just saying it's 15 though. That's on download.
We're using 15. Anyway, once we get all this figured out here, at 55 seconds on that video, we're going to see hopefully. See if you can look in the upper right hand corner and you can see that little cursor being moved by hand. The upper right hand at 55 seconds. Okay. See that? See the cursor?
I do.
See those balls over there that go around things? You see it moving around?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that means obviously it's being moved by hand, by someone.
That would give me indication that it's right.
And as you said, you saw the floodlight turn on in camera 2, which again we identified as file 18221-716 from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard at 10:17:26.
Okay.
And you heard the first shot on camera 2, different file number, which is 182220214, at an earlier moment, which you believe to be 30 seconds earlier based on the timestamps. Correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. The two shots in different.
No, the first shot on camera 2, which was filed, well, 182220214. That's the name of the file that I have to finish.
Okay.
You heard the first shot on camera 2 at an early moment, which you believe to be 30 seconds earlier based on the timestamps, right?
Correct.
So you figured the first shot would have occurred 30 seconds earlier in that same surveillance video in actual time.
Sir, I'm not.
Okay.
I understand your question.
Did you? Well, you agree that you said you went back 30 seconds or 30 seconds earlier when you heard that first shot, right?
Again, in comparison to the videos, as far as what the times they reflect. Yes.
And that's 30 seconds earlier than what the first what camera 2 showed.
Correct.
All right. And use that same exact amount of time, 30 seconds, to go back on the 1616 piece of market.
I believe so.
You agree if a floodlight turned on less than 30 seconds in actual time after the shot was heard on the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video, that means you went back too far on the piece of market, right? If the floodlight turned on less than 30 seconds.
Again, so this is, I mean, it wasn't an exact science,
No,
but,
I'm not
so I'm not sure about the exact seconds that you're pointing out.
Well, again, you just
Roughly, yes.
right, but one thing you just said you went back 30 seconds early based on the timestamps when you observed.
Correct, just roughly within that period.
And, right. So my question was, and again, I'm not criticizing your methodology, I'm saying, if the floodlight turned on less than 30 seconds in actual time after the shot was heard on the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video, that means that if you went back 30 seconds, that would be a little too far, right?
Could be, yes.
With regard to the 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video, you extracted 3 sets of videos from 3 different cameras maintained by the residents at that location.
Correct, that was what was correct.
And your understanding, those cameras run in actual time.
Yes, live.
But each camera, I think we've already discussed this last time we were here, that in fact, each camera is off from actual time by a different amount, between 2 to 3 minutes.
I'm not sure exact camera was on.
Check out this 60 yes.
What's the schedule?
It's 35.
Go over to Mr. Siegel.
They want to approach, we do that.
I do already, you're on. All right, that need to be up ready.
All right, chat. So they're just pointing out he doesn't have the timelines right, and that could be a problem here as far as pointing out who in these pictures are Rocky and when these things are actually occurring here. So they're going to, he's attacking the timeline. I don't think this is as big a score for him, but we'll see where it goes here. I mean, I'll defer to Takapina on this one. He's better than I do. So here we go.
2, 3, 7. You hear the first shot at 10:15:53. Tell me if you agree with that. Go ahead. Okay.
That's correct.
Right, okay. So you heard the first shot on that camera at 10:15:53 seconds.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I'm going to play camera 2, which I'm going to identify in my file number, which is 182200214. And you hear the same first shot just over a minute later on this camera at 10:16:56 seconds. Tell me if you agree with that afterwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that was 10:16:56 seconds on that camera, which is over a minute later from the first camera.
Correct.
And on the third camera, which is file 18221-240, you hear, hold on a second, wait. You hear that same first shot 4 seconds after that last video at 10:17 on the dot. Tell me if you agree.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a reason that the times would be off from each other is because at least 2 of the clocks are running faster than the other.
That could be a reason. Yes, independent systems.
And a reason that a timestamp on a camera would be faster than actual time is because the clock for that camera would be running faster than actual time.
Yes, sir. Just like here in the courtroom.
Good example, just like here in the world. With that in mind, let's look at one more. So we took that video from camera 2 just before the flood light goes off. And now I think it's the best that we're going to show, right? DD on. This is from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard. I got the file number reading again. It's 18221716. The first, before I play, the first timestamp shown on this camera is 10:17:17.
That's correct.
And the video itself is at 0 seconds because, hold on a second, 22 is in here. We do have, in fact, the same video. Okay. So, you just read the video itself at 0 seconds because it has not started yet, correct, sir?
That's correct.
10:17:17 seconds.
Yes, sir. From the clock.
All right, let's play the video until the floodlight is on. 9 seconds later at 10:17:26. Go ahead, please. Okay, you see that?
Yes.
Floodlight on?
Sure.
I'm sorry?
Yes,
Okay, and it says 10:17:26.
it does.
And how many seconds faster than, how many seconds later from 10:17:17 is that?
9 seconds.
9 seconds. Yeah, how many seconds right off the clock?
8.
So that's something's wrong there, right?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
whether or not it would stop right at 8:29, I don't know how to explain.
Well, okay. The clock says, okay. So it's 10:17:26 seconds, which is 9 seconds after 10:17:17 seconds. But the video only ran 8 seconds. You can see that, correct? And the floodlight is back on, right?
That's correct.
So this would indicate, at least here, that the video is about 1 second past here.
Could be within 1 second, correct?
Yeah. And given that, it's fair to say that the shot heard of 1616 East Del Mar should have been about a second later than showing the sequence surveillance video, right?
It's certainly not my area of expertise as far as the way sound travels and light travels and how they travel at different speeds. That would be within my expertise. That's correct.
Okay, that's right. Okay. You put this together, the sequence surveillance video, right?
No.
Who did?
I believe it was somebody in the district attorney's office.
Off of this stuff now, just 2 more minutes, and we're done. Now you. We earlier testified about the police officers who arrived at the scene on November 6th, 2021, remember those 7 officers?
Yes, I do.
They were there for approximately 20 minutes, more or less?
I think more or less.
20 minutes, yes, okay. And one last thing, you submitted, I guess in January of 2024, evidence to the ballistics lab for testing in this case, right?
Thereabouts, yes.
And the testing was done, oh, sorry, it was done it was submitted in December of 2023, right?
I believe that's
I
correct.
can just refresh.
I believe when the return came back, it's a different date than when it was submitted.
You're right, you're right. Just take a look, make sure. Same page.
Yes, sir.
So that report was, I guess, finalized in January 8th, 2024.
That's correct.
And that was given back to you, this report?
Yes, so it's submitted to myself and my partners.
But yet, that report was not given to the district attorney until about 2 weeks ago, for the first time, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Over a year since the report was given back to you or one of the parties.
Correct, that's my understanding. Yes. I believe it hadn't given, but I could be near. Correct.
Well, obviously, the district attorney represented that they got it the first time 2 weeks ago.
Correct.
The DA, was the DA even informed of its existence, do you know?
I'm sorry, what point?
Yeah, this only 53, 2 against 74, 7.
That's it. Okay, thank you for your time.
Is there a motion to strike whatever answer was given? I don't know what your answer.
I don't think you gave an answer.
The question is stricken, and if there was an answer, that's stricken as well.
So the last question, correct?
The last question? Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Zolman, do you have anything?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Detective, when we were testifying, I believe that was on Tuesday, you were asked questions about the latent fingerprint examination of the fire cartridge cases in this case. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And as a detective, you said you have almost 30 years of experience as a police officer, correct?
Just past my 29 members.
Okay. I round you up to 1 year. We call it just approximately 30 years. I appreciate it there. Okay. Do you have an understanding of what could potentially impact whether or not you would find a fingerprint on any kind of object?
Yes.
What are some of the factors that you're aware of?
Time in which it was processed, the exposure to the elements, rain, water, foot traffic, cars, depending on where it's at, wind, other weather events, any other people going through the area or touching vehicles. It just depends on where the item is going to be processed, with conditions it's found in, and how long it's exposed to those conditions.
What about temperature? Is that one of the things that would be potentially affected?
Yes.
Objection to leading.
Would exposure of a fingerprint to something of high temperature potentially impact whether or not it's able to be located?
I think so.
You also said that you've had extensive experience firing firearms, throughout your law enforcement career, correct?
Yes.
When a gun discharges a fire cartridge casing, when the first comes out of the gun, is it hot?
Yes, on a semi-automatic specifically, when it injects the cartridges, just from personal experience, I've had them land on me. When we looked at police academy, you should qualify, we're at a line. So oftentimes, cases are ejected as the next person next to
They
you
are
is fired.
hot when they land on you.
Many
Yes.
times I felt
Ow,
the
ow,
casing landed in
ow.
my neck or in my collar, and they're hot.
In your nearly 30 years of experience, and 29 years of experience as a police officer, can you personally recall any cases of yours where fingerprints were developed from fire cartridge casing?
None that I can think of.
And you said you've worked on homicide cases, correct?
Yes, sir.
A fair number of those involve firearms.
I think majority, yes.
Can you give the jury any idea of how many cases you've handled over your career?
I mean, between homicide cases or cases involving firearms, as the lead investigators or assisting in investigations, probably to date, I would say probably in excess of 2,000 cases I've assisted with.
You were asked similar questions about DNA evidence potentially on the fire cartridge case, right?
Yes.
And based on your background and experience, do you have any idea of things that could impact whether or not DNA is present on an item?
I mean, along the same lines as fingerprints and exposure to the elements, contamination, anything from human contamination, vehicle, wherever it's exposed to, weather.
Could temperature also potentially impact as well?
Yes.
In your almost 30 years experience as a police officer, can you personally recall any cases where DNA was developed on fire cartridge cases?
Nothing I can think of.
After the cartridge cases are booked, in your experience as a police officer, can they be made available to the defense if the defense wants to conduct their own independent testing?
Yes.
In this case, could the defense have done their own DNA testing?
Yes.
On cross-examination, you were specifically asked if you observed any video of Mr. Ephron returning to the crime scene the night of this incident. Was there any video in this case that you ever had possession of that was captured after 11:20 p.m., capturing specifically that intersection of Vista Del Mar and Selma?
No.
I want you to assume, for purposes of a hypothetical, that the victim in a case returns to a crime scene at 11:45 p.m. Would the video that you recovered that only goes to 11:20, would that video shown that person's presence at the scene?
No.
You were also asked about Mr. Ephron's girlfriend returning to the scene. Assume the same hypothetical that she came back with that individual at 11:20. Would the video that you collected in this case, would it even show her?
At 11:20?
Sorry, if she returned with Mr. Ephron at 11:45, the video that only goes up to 11:20 show her?
No.
Okay.
Objection, Your Honor. This is the fact not evidence. It just means that they didn't
Whoa,
have
whoa,
the
whoa,
video.
no speaking objection. Whoa, whoa,
Okay. On cross-examination,
whoa. No, stop. No editorializing by anyone. Ask another question. Mr. Silver.
just one more trying to organize this. In cross-examination, Mr. Beckman asked you questions about your prior testimony at the preliminary hearing, and specifically read you a passage regarding whether or not you asked Mr. Ephron if he had firearms back in November of 2021. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. In your testimony prior to that, were you asked,
Page one.
page 269,
Which
5,
Which volume?
volume 2, Your Honor.
2?
2, yes.
Which, repeat the page, please.
269. I'm gonna first go 5 to 11, Your Honor.
Can you ask the question back?
On cross-examination, Mr. Tuckman asked you questions about your prior testimony at the preliminary hearing and specifically read you a passage regarding whether or not you asked Mr. Ephron if he had firearms back in November of 2021. Do you recall that? Answer, yes. Question, do your testimony prior to that, were you asked? And then do you have a patient?
All right, what was the next question you were going to ask?
If you read the question he was asked on line 5, you go through his answer.
That's not prior inconsistency. What it says. Your question was, did he ask Ephron? That's not what this question asked.
I wasn't offering his prior inconsistency.
Why don't you just ask the same question that you asked the preliminary?
Did you ever look to see what firearms were registered to Mr. Ephron
Yes.
at the time of the incident, November of 2021?
Yes.
And what did you discover when you searched for any guns that would be registered to him at that time?
We did find any firearms registered to Mr. Ephron.
Okay. Okay. In your nearly 30 years of experience in law enforcement, have you ever conducted an interview with a significant witness in a case and either not recorded your interview or not taken notes and not written a report?
No, no, they're calling it.
As an investigator, can you tell the jury why you either record your interviews or take notes and then write a report immediately following your interviews?
I like to record because it's 100% accurate. The reports are done generally for our purposes as a summary, kind of as a refresher, to identify key points that were made during the interview. But again, my preference has always been to record, because that's always 100% accurate.
Would you ever interview a witness and not record the interview or not write a report or not take any notes of that interview in your experience as an investigator?
Objection, Your Honor, whether you would.
Well, the first question asked a significant witness. Now you're asking any witness.
Okay,
So, any witness, that question is irrelevant. The answer would be irrelevant.
sure. Imagine a scenario where you interviewed somebody months prior. Hypothetically, you did not record this interview, you did not write a report, and you did not take any notes. Then months later, you go back and try to summarize what that witness told you. Is that something that that witness is a significant witness in your case that you're investigating? Is that something that a trained police officer such as yourself would ever do?
Objection, Your Honor, full speculation.
Why not?
I mean, it's just not accurate. Again, my preference would be to record it, just so it's 100% accurate to go off that for any kind of summary.
Okay, in addition to going off of the summary, if you recorded your interviews in a case, are those also given to the district attorney?
Yes.
Would those also be given to the defense?
Yes, no.
Would anyone involved in the case then have the opportunity to hear verbatim what questions you asked and what the answers were that were given?
Correct.
Likewise, if you record your interviews, you said after you conduct an interview that you will summarize your interview in a police report, correct?
Yes. Typically in the police report or as part of the case, yes.
In this case specifically, did you speak to Mr. Ephron the day that you were assigned to this case?
Yes, on the November 9th, 2021, yes.
And did you record your interview with him in any way?
Yes, that was recorded, but it included myself, Detective Monson, Detective Menefee.
Understood, but when you say it was recorded, was it an audio recording?
That was not audio recording because it was a telephone interview.
And did the audio recording capture your voice and his voice?
It did.
Okay. When you later went back and, or not you, or when your partner, I believe you said, went back and summarized that interview, summarized it into a report, right?
Correct.
And I believe that you testified that there were a few sentences in the report that had some inaccuracies, correct?
That's correct.
But that was the inaccuracies in the report, those were not things that Mr. Ephron specifically said in the report. Were those inaccuracies in the report, or were those things that Mr. Ephron said in the report?
There were inaccuracies in the report. Sorry.
Okay. I believe you were specifically asked about whether after the shooting, Mr. Ephron contacted an attorney before he returned to the scene to recover the gun casings located at Selma and Mr. Delmont. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did Mr. Ephron ever make that statement to you that he did things in that order?
That is not my recollection.
if Mr. Ephron testified that he first collected the cartridge cases and then he contacted an attorney, did he ever tell you anything directly contradictory to that?
I'm sorry, Charles.
Yeah, if Mr. Ephron testified that he first went to the scene and collected the cartridge cases and contacted an attorney at some point after that, did he ever say anything to you that was different from that word?
No.
I believe you were also asked about the line in a report in which it was written that Mr. Ephron said that Bills had a knife. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did Mr. Ephron ever make that statement to you?
No.
Was that just an inaccuracy in the summary of the report?
That's correct. It's inaccurate.
When you were also asked if you, that essentially you knew that there was that inaccuracy in the report prior to your testimony today, correct?
Correct.
And you were asked if you ever went back to correct that police report, correct?
Correct.
Did you testify under oath at a prior hearing in November 2023 at the preliminary hearing to that inaccuracy?
Yes, sir.
So did you tell the court, the DA, and the defense that that line in your report that Bills had a knife was not correct?
That's correct.
Has Mr. Ephron ever identified anybody else other than Mr. Phillips, who we would call him ASAP 12B, as the person with the knife outside of the parking lot?
No.
On cross-examination, a little bit on Tuesday and into today, I believe mostly on Tuesday, you were asked about whether you reviewed individual videos, and based upon those individual videos, you could tell certain characteristics of the gun. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you review evidence to determine something like whether a gun is operable, if you have multiple videos, do you view those videos individually to make that determination, or do you view them collectively to make that determination?
Collectively, obviously, individually look at them as a whole, and obviously try to put them in sequence of events collectively.
Okay, and I believe you said when you reviewed the video from the parking structure, that individual video, you couldn't say it was an operable gun, correct?
Correct.
But when you review the video collectively, is it your belief that the gun that we see in the defendant's hand was operable? Objection. When you view the videos collectively, what was your opinion regarding whether the gun was operational?
It was an operational firearm.
How did you come to that determination?
I mean, in the totality of circumstances, the first view of the weapon, followed by the second view of the reaction to the incident, as the four individuals in the distance in the camera were scrambling, as you can see that something's going on, in conjunction with the sound of the shots heard from the other camera, and then the fluidity of everybody running through the cameras over to El Centro. That along the line with the information provided by Mr. Ephron, that was my opinion that it was an operable firearm and that shots had been fired.
Okay. When you reviewed the sequence surveillance video, were you reviewing whether or not they were sequenced? What were you using to determine whether they were sequenced accurately?
The totality just the movements of the individuals in the cameras, again, along with pieces of lights, but a lot of it has to do just with the sequence of events, walking around from one side to the next, and just kind of following the individuals in the video, and obviously in conjunction with the sound. So it sounds more difficult than it is, but it's just kind of collectively putting it all together and watching it.
Okay, from what you were just describing, it sounded like you were using audio and visual cues in the videos, correct?
Yes.
Did you specifically use the timestamps in order to determine if they were sequenced correctly?
No, not exactly. Obviously, I understand from collecting a lot of videos in a lot of cases that individual surveillance cameras systems are all different, and they all can be off by seconds, hours, depending on how they're maintained and kept and updated. So again, a lot of it has to do with just kind of finding certain markers within whatever crime, whatever we're looking for at the time, to try to kind of establish what happened when you're dealing with more than one camera that captures different points of view from different areas.
Okay, when you collect a video in your cases and you're checking the timestamps for accuracy, are you checking it down to the fraction of a second?
I mean, it's captured, and we take that into account and try to determine how far off it may have been. Again, the other factors include we can't control the maintenance of it, it's been updated when it's in service.
But to the fraction of a second, that's what you're checking, or are you checking minutes, hours, things like that?
Generally checking minutes, hours, and events captured that coincide with other markers that we do have, whether it's from another camera or a witness or something else that kind of puts us in that right time frame that we're looking for.
As to the videos from the residents on Del Mar that wouldn't have the audio, council kept using the word rewind. Were those physical tapes that you or your partners collected, or was that digital video?
The camera from 6200 residential is all digital.
Were any of the surveillance cameras in this case captured on manual analog tape, or were they all digital recorded?
Not all of them computer digital.
Okay. At the beginning of his questions of you, Mr. Takapina asked you about whether or not you had spoken to 12. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you know for a fact that 12E to this day still refuses to be interviewed by law enforcement?
Objection, that's just a fact, not supposed to be, as a state.
No speaking objections, it's, the objection to stay, that's another point.
To this day, have you been able to interview 12E?
No.
Have you ever been present when 12E was asked if he would agree to an interview?
Yes.
And what was his answer when asked if he would agree to an interview by law enforcement?
No.
Similarly, you were asked about whether or not you talked to Mr. Levy. Did you have any indication that before January 20th of 2025, the day before jury selection, that Mr. Levin had any role in this case?
No, not any direct.
Once you were made aware of that he could possibly have anything to say, did you take any efforts to try to interview him or talk to him?
Yes.
Were you successful in those efforts?
No.
Have you been present when Mr. Levin was also present and asked if he would specifically agree to be interviewed by law enforcement?
Yes.
And what was his answer to that question?
No.
As to both 12B and Mr. Levin, did those questions as to whether or not they would agree to an interview with law enforcement, did those occur in this courtroom?
Yes.
Did you or your partners attempt to speak to Mr. Mayers to the event?
Yes.
And were you or your partners successful in that effort?
No.
All right, I don't have anything.
Second? Yes, just briefly. Okay, we're almost done. We asked a bunch of questions, but it was long just now, about a host of inaccuracies on fairly significant issues in your reports.
The question is argumentative in itself, it's stated facts and not evidence.
Agreed.
Just a minute.
Mark?
I don't believe that the questions are argumentative. You assume it's facts, not evidence as well, Your Honor. The question you read back, read the question back.
Detective, almost done. You were asked a bunch of questions by Mr. Preslov just now about a host of inaccuracies on fairly significant issues in your reports.
Let's vague.
Okay. You asked questions about, let's generalize first, inaccuracies in police reports, right?
Correct.
Okay. One of those, for example, were who had the knife, right?
Yes.
That's a significant issue, isn't it?
Yes, the report, yes.
One was whether Mr. Ephron was instructed by his attorney to go back to the scene and pick up shell casings or not. That's a significant issue, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. And those two issues in the reports were inaccurate, correct, according to you.
Yes.
And those could have been corrected at some point, right?
Yes, it does.
They never were,
I mean, as far as generating a new report, other than what's been explained in court, no.
right? So the reports today are still accurate on those issues.
Correct.
You were asked about one of the let's start with this. 12. You were asked if you would agree to interview, if 12 would agree to interview by you, and you said he said no, he wouldn't. Are you referring to?
We'll get to this. This is a good question.
Are you referring to 2 weeks ago in court here?
Yes.
Is that the first time you tried to interview him?
Yes.
So, in January of 2025 is the first time you tried to interview 12 about an incident that occurred in November 6th of 2020.
Guys, I wore a shirt that I wasn't going to wear a nice shirt to get all covered in hair and stuff. Okay, I will change out shirts. Jesus Christ. I just don't like get my itchies all over the shirt, okay? Jeez. There, is that better now, chat?
Correct.
Correct. Me personally, yes.
How about anyone else in the police department?
Yes. No, no, me personally, correct.
Now, you were then asked questions about whether the firearm was operational. Remember those questions just now?
Yes, sir.
You testified already on cross-examination that the video from the garage, because we can't indicate if that's an operational firearm or not, correct?
Correct.
You testified on Tuesday
We'll get to
that
this.
the video from 1616 pieces of Lamar, that from that video, you said that video alone, there's no evidence of a shooting, correct?
That video alone, no.
Correct. But then you said the totality of the circumstances lead you to believe that the firearm was operational. Remember just that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the totality of the circumstances, Relli's testimony.
The physical evidence, the video, collectively, yes.
Well, the video, you just said both videos don't add to the fact that it's operational or not.
Collectively, as a whole, not the two that you decided, but in the entirety, all videos involved, yes.
Well, which video shows you the firearm was operational? Which
So as you put it together with the sound, with the sequence of events, along with the physical evidence and the statement from Mr. Ephron, That is just my opinion, that it is operational, and that's why I believe it.
Well, take out Mr. Ephron for 1 second, because he's the one who comes to shell casings, right?
Yes.
And he's the one who gives you the narrative on that video that you can't tell what happened, the 1616.
Correct, I mean, he provides a narrative of the sequence of events, the initial encounter of the gun that was displayed to him, what he believed to be a gun.
Right.
Whether it's operational or not at that point, I can't tell you. But the sequence of events as they evolved to Selma and Bisville more, the cameras there, the incident took place as far as what I can describe as a scramble during some, obviously, the events that occurred there with Mr. Ephron described as being shot at was consistent in conjunction with the audio from the cameras. Again, this is just what I'm looking at when I'm trying to rationalize and give my opinion as to why I believe it is. Okay, that was fired.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
take Mr. Relli and Mr. Ephron out of the equation for a second.
Okay.
Take him out of the equation. You don't have Mr. Ephron. And therefore, his shell casing and helium, which we talked about the issues with that on Tuesday. Without Mr. Ephron and his narrative or version of events, with those 2 videos that you said intendedly, you cannot tell it's not a firearm, and the second video you said you can't see there is a firearm.
The improper hypothetical which relies on evidence. If the answer there was yours, just
You want to use that? There's one.
No.
Okay, okay.
taking something out of the equation then makes the hypothetical irrelevant. So that's another issue.
Is your conclusion based on the fact that Relli's narrative is truthful?
It is consistent up to the point of what he describes occurred, based on what I've been able to see in connection with the physical evidence that has been provided.
So let me break it down this way. Video 1 alone, you don't know if that's on.
Correct.
Video 2, that's 1660 piece of mark. So what? You don't even know if there's a gun on in case of the video.
Specifically, just looking at that, without looking at anything else, no.
You then hear sounds that appear to be a gunshot, right?
Correct.
Aside from the gun, what else do you make those sounds? Not with the gun, I should say.
The sound that I heard on the camera, I mean, a firearm, some kind of replica firearm potentially, but distinct sound of firearm. Then again, my belief it was a firearm.
Right. Thank you.
Would you agree that you don't need Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony in order to determine that a shooting occurred in that location?
The question was asked. That's a different question.
Thank you, question. Yes.
Yeah.
Would you agree you don't need Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony in order to determine that a shooting occurred at that location?
So taking my lead equation. That's number 1. 2 is leading. The leading is leading.
Yeah, the court's ruling regarding more sheets of objection.
Taking my lead equation.
Those are not moving around other speech.
Leading,
Read the question again.
Would you agree you don't need Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony in order to determine that a shooting occurred at that location?
It would be a proper question if the question ended with occurred. But when you say at that location, then I believe that calls for speculation.
Would you agree you don't need Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony to establish a shooting occurred?
Yes.
I do not. So without Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony, what leads you to believe a shooting without Mr. Ephron's truthful testimony? So I guess it's now out of the equation. What would lead you to believe a shooting occurred?
Again, just looking at the video, the first incident ever against this way, he obviously follows through with a scramble of the best try.
That's not.
Is
You need to answer questions. Ask questions. You ask questions.
Okay, so
So again, just looking at everything in combination, even without Mr. Ephron's statement, if I were an investigating officer just responding to investigate a shooting scene where maybe there was some evidence found and establishing what had occurred without a potential witness, would be obviously look at the same video, listen to the same sound of gunfire. Again, just factors that would be known at the time. But it would still lead to believe that there had been some actual shooting short of a recording witness being present. I would still believe that.
okay. So you first cited the fact that the gun was displayed. That's the first thing you just cited, right?
Correct.
Which you already told the jury. The gun that was displayed, the only time you can see gun in any video was the part you watched video.
Correct.
You already told the jury. By that video, you can't tell it's not, right?
Correct. It wasn't fired at that point.
Well, you also said the sound could also have been made by a non-operable firearm. You just said that.
Again, it's in the realm of possibilities. From what I've heard, again, based on the sound, again, this is just my opinion, my expertise, and my experience. I believe it to be a firearm.
You also heard, you hear when the police officers body cam from the scene was played, right?
Yes, sir.
You heard the police officer say there's no evidence of shooting here. You heard that, right?
Yes, sir.
No, no.
All right. Thank you, Detective Flores. You can step down next witness.
My next witness is Mr. Rakim Mayers.
Do I have a witness?
It is.
All right, chat. Hold on. Did they say it's the last witness for them?
No, no.
All right. Thank you, Detective Flores. You can step down next witness.
My next witness is Mr. Ephron.
Last week's witness?
It is. Mr. Ephron.
Last week's witness?
It is.
Okay, guys, this is going to be like the evidence tech and the tool mark tech, probably, who's like, I examined the shell casings, and that's where we're going to get the Glock part out of this. So. Libby, there's, we'll get to this in a minute, okay?
No,
Yeah.
sorry.
And we'll see here. And Jesus loves you. You are correct. There is enough circumstantial evidence to convict. That 9mm magazine found in Rocky's house is really bad for him. It's really fucking bad for him. But I think there's enough here where a jury could say, nah, we're not doing it. And I think they'd be well within their rights here. So let's just get to it then and see where we're at here. Let's see where we're at.
Just raise your right hand for us, please. Give yourself and state that the testimony you may give in the cause not that before this court. Should the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about God? I do. Please take a seat and witness stand there. Thank you. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Fadil Dirham. First name Fadil. Last name Biraimaah.
Thank you. Sir, can you tell the jury who you work for?
Yes, for the Los Angeles Police Department Forensic Science Division.
And how long have you worked for LAPD?
Just shy of 20 years.
Are you a police officer?
No.
Where do you work within LAPD?
So I'm a civilian employee. I'm a criminalist employed at the Forensic Science Division, essentially the crime lab.
Is the laboratory that you work in a regular lab?
It is.
And what's your job title of the laboratory?
I'm a criminalist 3.
How long specifically have you been a criminalist
For 19 years, almost.
The entire time you've worked?
Yes.
We'll get to this in a
what
second,
unit are
Chad.
you currently assigned within the lab?
Within the lab, I've actually just recently been assigned to the toxicology unit. It's a very recent assignment. I've been in firearms for about the 20 years prior to that.
Okay. You say very recent. When was that transfer made?
January 13th.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay. Your entire time before that, you said you worked in the firearm analysis unit?
Correct.
Okay. Can you give the jury just a broad idea of what your job duties entail when you work in the firearm analysis unit?
So a criminalist in the firearms unit, we are primarily trained to perform work within the laboratory. That's where we spend most of our time. We perform the analysis of firearms and firearm-related evidence. This is the type of analysis that's commonly referred to as ballistic comparison. We call it firearm identification. In addition to this, we respond to the field in order to process crime scenes, particularly shooting scenes and officer-involved shootings are our main field obligations. We generate reports regarding these analyses and testify about them in court.
When you're specifically analyzing firearms and firearm-related components, can you give the jury an idea of what some of those items are that you're looking at?
Yes, so we are trained in the operation and structure of a wide range of different firearms. A firearm for us is a device that propels a projectile by means of combustions. So this wouldn't really include airsoft guns, things of that nature. But firearms, which actually fire live cartridges or ammunition, during the discharge process, they will actually cause marks to be impressed onto those ammunition components. So this is a large part of our responsibilities, is to perform the microscopic comparison of fired ammunition components. These can be bullets or cartridge cases, with the aim of determining what types of firearms they might be compatible with, or actually continuing to determine whether 2 items have been fired in the same firearm or were eliminated as having been fired in the same firearm.
Can you tell the jury about your educational background, any training or experience that you have that qualifies you to perform those functions that you just described in the lab, comparing firearms and firearm-related components?
Yes, well, entry-level criminalists have a natural chemistry, natural science background. I have a degree in biochemistry. This prepares you for most of the work in the crime lab, but to perform the analyses in the firearm analysis unit, we complete another lengthy training program. This is the firearm examiner training program. It has a duration of about 2.5 years. It includes lecture, literature review, and live fire exercises. By these means, we learn about the structure and function of ammunition. We learn to operate a wide range of different firearms. And we actually spent about an 18-month period training on microscopes in order to perform the comparison of discharge fire components. I completed that training program in 2009. I spent the following decade as a full-time firearm examiner. Each year of that period, I was tested by an outside firm in order to maintain my qualification. I am also certified by the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. This is the premier professional organization in my field, certified in the area of firearm examination and identification. In the course of my work there, I performed the examination of more than 3,600 items of evidence, logged more than 600 hours on the processing of crime scenes, and about 6 years ago, I advanced to the position of criminals 3. So in addition to the duties I described, I also do training of other firearm examiners. I work on special projects and research for the firearm analysis.
Do you continue to attend professional organization meetings to maintain your proficiency in firearm analysis?
Yes, during that period, under our accreditation requirements, it's encouraged for us to have continuing education. So I've completed, I believe, about 575 hours of additional coursework.
And guys, yes, we get to the issues here of the accreditations. These accreditation organizations exist to basically launder their credibility. So he's a member of an organization. He's a member of associations, and they just launder each other's credibility. And that's how this works. And yes, on-the-job training, and yeah. I hate this crap with a fury of 1,000 suns.
Side of the actual department. This includes workshops and training from some of the leading professionals in my industry, as well as certain agencies such as the...
Also, hi to Hella and everybody here who rated. Thanks for being here, guys. We're doing the forensic firearms technician who's going to explain to us how these, the shell casings came from a Glock. We're going to see that. We'll see what he's got.
California Criminalistics Institute, which is operated by the California Department of Justice.
You mentioned that you were tested by an outside LD, right?
Yes.
Are those commonly called proficiency tests?
Yes.
And are they required to maintain your accreditation?
Yes, the lab is accredited, and requirements for that, we must participate in proficiency testing by approved vendors outside of our actual agency.
And are those tests graded? Those proficiency tests?
Yes, they're evaluated.
And have you successfully completed them?
Yes.
Approximately how many times do you think you've testified in court about firearm and tool mark identification?
I'd say over 60 times. I testified around 75 times in total. That includes testifying about field work as well.
Okay. In a general sense, what was you were let's start with, you were assigned as a criminalist in this case, correct?
Yes.
And what was the task that you were assigned to complete specifically related to this case?
I was tasked with the analysis of 2 ammunition components. These are cartridge cases, discharged cartridge cases, or a type of examination that we call type and caliber determination.
I'm going to move into a different area. Do you want me to start that? Or?
Well, it's close enough. We'll break it.
Sure.
Guys, the state's still presenting their case. We have not gotten a directed verdict yet. We're still a ways from that. So we got to get through this witness, guys. We're not even close to that yet.
For a second, before we go through it.
Okay. In case not to tell anybody else, and again, don't look at the internet or any print media, no electronic media. But please continue to keep an open mind about this case. We'll see it when you're back.
All right, Chad. We're gonna get into some comments here quick. So Jesus loves you says, "Here's 5, Sean. Put it towards a new shirt." Like I said, I wore a shittier shirt to get my haircut in, so I don't have shit all over it. Thank you. Robert says, "What's Rocky's excuse to why he can't show them the gun he had?" What's his excuse? He doesn't have a fucking burden of showing it. They have to show how he had a 9mm handgun. I mean, that's the excuse, is the burden of proof. The burden of proof is the excuse.
Jury vote, B or D, first letter question.
B as in
B is in roll. All right, jurors are left with one or not.
Not really the question we asked the executive on the stand. And the question involved video during the question involved whether or not there was video that was available that would have shown the witness and the girlfriend had that given the time that was involved. Now, the court indicated that they showed up after the stop. Mr. Siegel said, the court stated objection, but I believe I heard Mr. Siegel say, that doesn't mean they didn't have the video. Now, if this is, yeah, that's what I said. Okay, so I'll just ask, again, because of my court hearings, I'm not the best reporter of this, but I just want to ask, if the court reporter can check if that line is in there, because if the jury heard that, if I heard right, and the jury heard it, that's
Repeat what you think you heard.
I thought I heard him say, in reference, that doesn't mean they didn't have the video. Meaning, in essence, that we would have had a video.
Hold on, right, but that doesn't mean
They didn't have the video. So, again, maybe I heard wrong, because I don't hear right, but I mentioned it as soon as I heard it, I objected. I couldn't make a speaking objection, so we had to bring it up after the jury was on. So I just asked
Right,
that.
so I can understand. The question was, would something, if the video stopped at 11:20, would something that occurred at 11:45 appear on the video that stopped 45 minutes
So
away?
it was during one of those couple of questions involving Mr. Presenting. He asked about the victim, he also asked about his girlfriend. I believe it was a question about the girlfriend in the video. And
All right, can you look at that? Do you, is that the question? That wasn't, that was the question. So, can you just look at those words? All right, see everybody 145. I just briefly said, Mr. Abrahima said,
All right, chat. So they're arguing about something that happened there. It's not really too relevant. Maddie B saying, if you can't speak an objection, how the hell do you object? Do you put your hand up like elementary school? No. It's pretty simple. A speaking objection is, so all he has to say is objection, speculation. A speaking objection is, Your Honor, objection, speculation. He doesn't know what somebody else was thinking. You merely state the grounds for it. Speculation, hearsay, facts not in evidence, foundation, whatever it is, multiple questions, improper question, whatever it is, you just merely state the actual reason. You don't have to spell it out. The speaking objection is where you introduce the argument. That's a speaking objection. So that's what a speaking objection is. You're allowed to say objection, hearsay. That's it. If you need to explain it more, you need to approach the bench. Geez, Louis says, Lamau, I'm just joking. Well, yeah, sorry. Had a long day today. My apologies. Libby says, I really need you to help translate what's going on. It's hard to understand. They're kind of squabbling over the videos. The videos aren't really going to be helpful for Rocky. I don't understand why Takapina spent time on that. I kind of write that off, really. That was kind of a waste of time with the detective. I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle about it. Remember, it's the idea about whether or not Rocky had a real gun is the real issue here. Is there enough circumstantial evidence to collect? Yes, very much so. But would I argue that there's still enough to acquit? Oh, yeah. And Robert Lawrence saying, even if he had a gun, was it in self-defense? Well, remember, in self-defense, you have to use, number one, your force has to be reasonable and proportional. So at that point, Relli doesn't have a gun, and Relli comes running up on him, and they're having another fist fight. You don't get to pull a gun out. Like, you don't get to pull your gun out. Like, that's not reasonable nor proportional. Also, Rocky has not made that argument because it wouldn't work. Nobody believe it. So that should tell you a lot why he didn't make that argument here. Hella mad. It's been a matter of 14 months. Thanks for the support, Hella. Guys, hearsay for days, and I know she's doing stuff throughout the week. It says, here, Clyde. Proof of life, please. I don't know. Let's see if I can get him. Hey, Clyde, come here, Bubba. Rick, come on. Clyde, hey. You were just pawing up on me like 10 minutes ago, buddy. Come here. Come on. Come on, Clyde. Hey. Clyde. Come here, buddy. Come on. All right, I guess not right now. We'll probably have to save it for the 9:30 show. So, anyways, chat, we're going to get ready here. We're going to time travel. And let's get going. So he says 1:45. Let's see what time they actually come back. Let's see what time it is when they come back. We got another. Yeah, they didn't come back. Well, this is better. It's not a whole half hour late. It's only a couple minutes late.
Mr. Siegel, that said, it would just mean that they didn't have a video that said overruled, no speaking objection, overruled. And then you said, Your Honor, can the jury? And I said, no editorializing by anybody. Ask another question, Mr. Prislow.
Your Honor, that was a comment that conveyed to the jury that there was potentially video that they didn't have. It's not just a speaking objection. Of course, basically it's a standing objection. And what it is
No, I said overruled.
whether it's,
All right, so what is it that you want? You are focusing on minutia.
Judge, what I want is I want the unethical conduct to stop.
I'll stop. Both of you knock it off.
Talk about the day one, Judge. I mean, that's.
Knock it off. Enough. Stop, Mr. Lewis.
What are we gonna do, Judge?
The objection was overruled. You're focusing on minutia.
You mean a
There you go,
speaking objection
Hella.
where you work out something for the jury?
What do you want me to do? Tell me what you want me to do.
Judge, you instructed repeatedly that there's a difference between a speaking objection when you're trying to even communicate a legal reason. That's not even a legal reason. That's basically shouting out a fact to the jury. It is, Your Honor, we've had in this case, time after time after time, and what happens is, unfortunately, the conduct doesn't result in any inconsequence. So, Your Honor, again, what I asked at the time was, I just wanted the court to, when the comment was made, I wanted the court to say to the jury, that comment should not be made and you're disregarded.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it.
All right.
Both sides have been speaking objection.
Judge, we have not one time in this case, both sides at points have made speaking objections where they've tried to clarify a point of law or say, here's why question. We have not one time made a comment like that regarding evidence. And we're not in a vacuum, as the court is aware from the conversations that have been had. I'm not making this point in a vacuum. The court knows exactly what I'm talking about, and so does the defense. And there's a point where we just have it. It's not right.
The jury's going to be told that a question by an attorney is not relevant. It only applies needing to the answer. There was no answer to the question. This is minutia. This doesn't amount to anything. I don't want to take any more time about this. The jury's waiting outside. The jury can come in. I need to start. No response is necessary.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yes, Jack. Clyde is hugging you. Now, that was a very interesting argument. The prosecutor's like, well, the question was improper. And the judge is like, the fuck you want me to do about it? It didn't get answered. So that's all that matters. You know, and he just pointed out, you're arguing over the nonsense here. So that was actually a pretty good argument here. Ford says, why is the judge not held the prosecutor contempt? It's not been contempt yet, but like, the prosecutors are acting like whiny assholes. They're not contemptuous yet, but they're getting there. They're getting there. They're not, I mean, they're getting there, but that's still a long ways off. So.
Thank you. So when we broke, right before we broke for lunch, you told the jurors about your background and education and training in this area. And I believe you left off and mentioned that in this case specifically, you were asked to conduct what's called a type and caliber analysis of 2 fired cartridge cases that you identified. Is that an accurate summary?
Yes.
Okay. In order to illustrate some of the topics that you're going to be discussing today, did you create a PowerPoint presentation that addresses the type of exam that you did and illustrates the various terms that are going to come up throughout this examination?
I did.
Okay. Now, I'd ask Mark my next exhibit, but you need 43 with Mr. Brian's PowerPoint presentation. Can you see it on the screen?
This
Oh, let me turn on your little screen. Here. So you don't concentrate.
Yes,
All right. Is this the presentation that you created for this case?
it is.
We go forward to slide number 2. Can you tell the jurors what we see on the slide?
Sure. Well, in the course of this examination, there's a few different areas of basics that will help the jury understand the fundamentals of what we're talking about, and then actually the conclusions at the end of the examination. These topics are separated on this slide. They include firearm identification, cartridge components, pistol discharge, type and caliber determination, evidence features, ghost guns, and my ultimate findings.
Okay, we go forward to start with the first topic on your list, which was firearm identification. If you would tell the jurors what generally firearm identification is.
Yes, so within forensic science, there is a large discipline called tool mark identification. So this is simply the practice of looking at marks that are caused when a harder object impacts a softer object. Sometimes those marks can actually give us information about the objects involved. Firearm identification, what most people would call ballistic comparison, is really a subset of tool mark comparison, in which that tool is actually a firearm.
You talked about different types of tool marks. Can you discuss that just a little bit more for the jury? What it is that you're looking at when you do a tool mark identification examination?
Yes, well, the tool is simply the harder of the two objects in forcible contact. The reason we use that word is because this is often performed using hand tools like chisels or bolt cutters. If they're used in many different types of incidents, robbery crimes and such, they can leave marks on items that they come into contact with. Those types of marks vary. There's two different general types. The first is an impression. An impression is straightforward contact between the harder and softer object under pressure. The striation includes that contact, but it also includes lateral motion. So essentially, an impression is a dent, and a striation is a microscopic scrape.
Okay. Can you talk to the jurors how this relates specifically to firearms?
Yes. Well, the discharge of a gun releases immense pressures. It does so quickly that we often don't think about it. The pressure you use to actually inflate a tire is maybe on the order of 35 pounds per square inch. A 9mm Luger cartridge, when it discharges, releases pressures around 35,000 pounds per square inch, or PSI. These are just immense pressures, and they slam ammunition components into the gun. And that's the forcible contact that we're talking about during a firearm identification tool mark damage.
You talked about fire ammunition components. Would a cartridge case be, or a cartridge be one of those ammunition components?
Yes, a cartridge case is part of a live round of ammunition for a cartridge. That's one of the types of components that we examine.
Okay. If you would, I want to talk in more detail about the cartridge specifically and its components. Go on to the next slide. Would you explain to the jury the cartridge?
Yes. So a lot of times people will say to fire a gun, you load it with bullets. That's not exactly true. What you need is a round of ammunition, also known as a cartridge. The top left image there, you see an actual photograph of a few cartridges. And in the larger portion of this diagram, there's a simplistic diagram of one round of ammunition. It has a few different parts. The first part is that cartridge case. It's a brass cup that essentially holds all the other components together. Jammed into the mouth of that cartridge case is the bullet. This is the actual projectile that's going to travel from the gun towards the target. Within the cartridge, you'll see some grayish material. This is the pellet or gunpowder. And at the very rear of the cartridge is the primer. This is a small metal cup. It contains some shock-sensitive explosive. When this primer is struck by a portion of the gun, called the firing pin, it explodes, causes the powder to burn very rapidly. At this point, the cartridge sort of functions like a champagne bottle being popped. The bullet is going to leave the cartridge like a cork from a champagne bottle. The cartridge case, that brass cup, is going to remain in the firearm at least for a period of time.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Can you explain to the jurors the different parts that we see here in slide number 10?
Yes, slide 11. No problem. It essentially is just showing you another depiction of what we just spoke about. So here we have two live cartridges on the outside of this photograph. Each of those is ready to actually be loaded and fired. Just inward from those, you'll see two cartridges of the same types, which I've actually pulled apart. So here you can see at the bottom, there is the cartridge case, that gold-colored round item with the writing on it that's facing us. The primer is in the center of that.
I will say so far, this is actually a pretty good explanation of how breaking down a cartridge. There's actually a pretty good job by him. I will say a lot of firearms examiners suck at this, but this is pretty good by him so far.
The grayish black powder material there is the propellant. That's actually going to give the discharge its pressure. And at the very top of the center of the photo are two different bullets. These are typically going to be copper wrapped around a heavy lead core, and that's the projectile that travels through the barrel towards the target.
Okay. How do we understand the component?
Guys, he's got to explain what his job is and how he can. He has to lay the foundation for explaining how he can tell you what's happened to the cartridge casings and the markings on them. So he has to show his knowledge of how guns work. So he's an expert witness. He has to show his expert knowledge.
And so the cartridge, I want you to explain to the jurors the discharge process. If you would, let me get to the next slide. Can you describe for the jurors what we see here?
Right, so here we have a simplified diagram of a cartridge that's positioned within a semi-automatic pistol so that it can be fired. The cartridge is located in essentially a tube of the barrel. It holds that cartridge and it will guide the barrel bullet as it exits the gun towards the target. This cartridge is in the unfired state and it's ready to discharge.
And you said this illustration specifically is of a semi-automatic handgun, correct?
Correct.
All right, I'm going to click it and it will show us sort of the actions or what's happening within the gun at the time the trigger is pulled and the cartridge is fired, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you describe for the jurors what the action was or what we saw in motion on that animation?
Yes, so the first cartridge has discharged. The propellants burned and the bullet went down the barrel towards the right side of the image. At that same time, that pressure is actually going to be harnessed by the mechanism within the gun. It will cause the top of the gun, it's called the slide, to recoil, to move to the rear. This is going to use some of that energy from the first cartridge that's fired in order to prepare the gun to be fired again by a second pull of the trigger.
Okay. Would you describe the kind of bluish tinted area that we see in the handle of the gun there?
Yes, so that's depicting what's called a magazine. This component will actually be inserted inside the grip of this type of firearm. Magazine holds rounds of ammunition, stores them within the gun until they're ready to be fired. Essentially, it works like a Pez dispenser, if you're familiar with that, without the plastic head. So it's a box, it's got a spring in the bottom, and it pushes the cartridges towards the top. When the first cartridge fires, the top of that gun reciprocates, you saw it move. This allows the gun to first remove the expended cartridge case from the chamber where a live cartridge needs to be positioned to fire a second time. It reloads that chamber with the top cartridge that's in the magazine, and it also resets the internal mechanism of that gun. When we say that a gun is semi-automatic, that specifically means that every time you pull the trigger, one cartridge is fired. It's going to function like Windex bottle. I can hold the trigger all day, no more ammunition is going to be expended. So that is semi-automatic, as opposed to full automatic would function like an aerosol can. I hold the trigger and it will continue firing until the source of ammunition is depleted.
When you talked about the expended cartridge, that's the piece of the cartridge case that's left in the gun after the bullet comes out for what would be essentially a fraction of a second, correct?
Yes, that's the cartridge case. That's the brass cup. It's depicted in gold color on these particular diagrams. And that is the part that will be expended and ejected from the chamber.
How does that happen? How does it eject out of the gun?
Again, this is one of the functions that the mechanism is doing when it harnesses that energy. After discharge, there's a small hook in the gun called an extractor. It's going to pull that cartridge case out of the chamber rearward from the barrel. It's going to hit another implement called the ejector. At that point, it's going to be flipped out of the gun. It essentially will appear like if you flipped a quarter as hard as you could towards your right shoulder. So that expended cartridge case will be cleared from the gun and remain in the vicinity to do it.
And is that action that you just described consistent among all semi-automatic firearms?
Yes, to fire a semi-automatic gun, such as depicted here, more than once, you will have to clear the chamber of that expended cartridge case. It's a necessity to fire multiple times.
We've covered this a couple of times, so if you would just briefly talk about what the distinction between that action would be versus a revolver.
So a revolver uses a different mechanism. You may have seen these in Western type movies. Rather than having a magazine and a single chamber, there's a part called a cylinder. This is a cylindrical component that can be loaded with a number of cartridges.
I actually think I know, chat, what they're going to say. The markings on the casings are not from a revolver. That's probably what they're going to argue, that there was no starter pistol or revolver involved, and that the extraction marks were from a semi-automatic handgun. I think that's why they're coming up with the revolver stuff.
That component will then be rotated, bringing each cartridge in line with the barrel one by one, so that each can be fired. After that cartridge is fired, the cartridge case in a revolver will remain in the chamber of that cylinder until it is manually extracted and ejected from the gun.
Okay. move on to the barrel of the gun, when you talk about what happens in the barrel when the gun is discharged.
Right, so this is the portion of the gun that's most interesting to a firearm examiner during discharge. So I just enlarged that to the barrel. The rear part, you can see it's specifically made to accept that cartridge. That's the chamber. The entire device runs off pressure. So the rear of that barrel has to be closed off. This will be accomplished by a surface that's called the breech face. It's illustrated here in that bluish green. In the center of that breech face, there is a hole or a channel that allows the firing pin to protrude and strike the cartridge and initiate the discharge.
Now, specifically with the examination you did in this case, would you agree that a lot of the information that you're looking at comes from that area around where the breech face, the aperture, and the firing pin are?
Yes, a great deal of the information for cartridge cases in general, and in this examination in particular, will come from that portion of the firearm.
Because it's important to this examination, would you just highlight with the pointer exactly where those three different features are? The breech face, the aperture, and the firing pin?
Sure. So the breech face is going to be the forward surface of this blue block. That's simplified for the purposes of the diagram. You'll see this channel that's meant to depict an opening in this solid breech face. The very opening forward portion of that channel is called the firing pin aperture. It's just the name we use for that hole, the opening. And depicted in orange, this simple cylindrical implement is the firing pin that will be propelled forward, strike the primer, and initiate discharge.
You said in your examination in this case, you looked at two of those fired cartridge cases, those brass cups, as you talked about, correct?
Correct.
You did not specifically evaluate any actual guns in your examination in this case, correct?
Correct.
So how is it that you were able to see any of the information that would come from the gun, meaning the breech face, the firing pin, or the aperture, if you didn't have a gun and all you had was that brass piece that was ejected from the gun?
Right. So again, this is an effect of those immense pressures and forces that are involved in discharge. Someone about my size stepped on a soda can. I'm considering, I believe it's about 5 pounds per square inch. You can imagine that surface of the street could then cause dents into that soda can. Here we're talking about pressures in the order of 35,000 pounds per square inch. These are acting on surfaces of a cartridge case, which are not much harder or much different than you might find in a soda can. This allows just huge amounts of information to be imprinted into the material of the cartridge case, allowing type caliber determinations to occur, giving me a job.
Okay. Look forward to the actual discharge process. Can you describe what we see on slide 19?
Sure. So it is depicted that firing pin coming forward, slamming into the primer, initiating discharge. Once that bullet has moved to the end of the tip of my finger, it is moving at the speed of a commercial jet, and it's rotating now at maybe 60,000 to 80,000 rotations per minute. So a great deal of energy has been released. The bullet's on its way out of the gun through the barrel, and pressure is slamming that cartridge case into the surfaces of the gun. This allows that firing pin to leave an impression. The firing pin aperture itself can be impressed into that primer with such a force that we can see the actual imprint, and also breech face markings. The small imperfections of that breech face can actually be impressed into the surface of the cartridge case, just as you would impress a fingerprint into a lump of clay.
Okay. This is an illustration that you have on the slide 19, correct?
Yes.
Did you put actual examples of these different components, the breech face, apertures, in your presentation?
There are, yes, some exemplars. There's only one, I believe, that's related to this case. These images, such as the firearm you're seeing, are unrelated examples.
Okay. What specifically are you showing here in slide number 21?
So what you just saw was a gun that's slowly been disassembled to show you the internal parts that are going to be in contact with the cartridge during discharge. We're looking on the left side of the image. We're looking rearward at that breech face. This is the surface that will close off the back door of that barrel, the tube behind that live cartridge. The main area is tinted blue there. That is the breech face surface. You look towards the center, you'll see a dotted line. Just added that dotted line around that opening. That opening is the actual firing pin aperture. And within the opening, you'll see an orangish sort of elongated implement. That's the firing pin. On the right side of that diagram, you'll see an illustration of the types of marks that we'll talk about. The blue area, that circular area, is the primer. It's a soft metal where that explosion happens on the other side of it. Marks from the breech face can come over. You'll see that dotted line outlining the firing pin aperture, and an actual impression into the material from the firing pin striking and causing discharge.
Okay, you said the illustration or the animation of the gun slowly being taken apart. I'm going to just go back so we can follow what you were showing. It goes by a little quickly, so I'll play it again.
Sure, so the top is a slide and barrel. Now I'm taking the slide and the barrel apart. And here we're looking at the slide, which has that breech face surface within it.
Okay. Number one, you just slide number 22. Would you describe what you're illustrating here?
So a typical firearm identification task will often include what we call an actual microscopic comparison. I'll use an instrument to look at the tool marks on two items such as cartridge cases, with the aim of trying to determine if they were fired by the same particular source. You could come to an opinion that they were fired by the same gun, or an opinion that they were not fired by the same gun, meaning they've been eliminated. That information is typically most useful when there is a gun in evidence. So here we just sort of depicted that there's a firearm. Test fires from that firearm can be compared to the two evidence cartridge cases connected with the dotted lines down there. The cartridge cases depicted in different colors, sort of just indicating that sometimes the features of those actual marks will be sort of an apples and oranges situation. And we can tell even without looking at the microscopic markings that they were fired from different guns.
You said what was displayed up here would be an identification that you can make if you had a gun to actually compare the fired cartridge cases to, correct?
That's what's most useful? Yes.
If you hypothetically had received a gun, in this case, to compare to the two fired cartridge cases, could you determine scientifically if that particular gun that was provided to you was the one that fired these cartridge cases?
I could perform a side-by-side microscopic comparison on a comparison microscope. If the marks are of sufficient quality, it may allow me to come to the opinion that, yes, the reason for the agreement of those marks is I'm of the opinion that we're fired in the same gun. Conversely, it could lead us to the opinion that they were not fired in the same gun.
That was my next question, was if you were provided, hypothetically, if you were provided a gun to compare to two fired cartridge cases, you could also definitively say, looking at these individual marks, that that gun was not used to fire those cartridge cases. Is that what you're saying? Is that correct?
Yes, there's identification, same gun. Elimination, they were not fired in the same gun. If there's any deficiencies with the items, we can just say inconclusive, meaning I can't give you any definitive.
Okay, and that's if you have a gun. But if you don't have a gun, what are you looking at? In a case like this, or what you call a no gun?
Right, so you can perform that comparison with two cartridge cases collected in the same area. But again, it does not tend to give you much additional information. What we will tend to do, if you just had two items collected at a crime scene, for instance, is perform what's called a type and caliber determination. So here we would be trying to characterize or describe types of guns which we know to produce marks, such as those that we see on the evidence.
Okay, which gets into the analysis that you did the type and caliber, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's talk about caliber first, or how you do these types of analysis.
Right, so this is basically reiterating what I just discussed. So type and caliber, we're leaning towards trying to determine two different groups of information. First, the caliber, the specific type of ammunition, the size of ammunition that the unknown gun is intended to fire. And then we will actually look at the marks on the exhibit to see if we can begin to list some brands of firearms which we know to produce similar marks.
Okay, when you're looking at fired cartridge cases, is it difficult to determine what the caliber is?
Cartridge case is not so difficult. They have a portion on the rear of the cartridge case surrounding that primer that typically has what we call a head stamp, meaning that the manufacturer has stamped in usually some identifying information of who made the cartridge, and also the caliber of firearm it's intended to be used with.
Okay. Moving on, can you describe the illustration you have here in slide 27?
Right, so this is just to get a sense of that type of caliber examination. Imagine that you have a clean kitchen floor and 30 seconds later you have a muddy footprint right in the middle of it. Something we're just instinctively going to do is look at the basic size of that footprint. At this point, we're probably going to narrow it down to some of your family members as opposed to others. You could look closer into that footprint, and if you see a particular design that is typical of a particular brand of shoe, this can further narrow sort of your list of suspects in your household. Type and caliber determination is essentially you're just doing that same process, but we're doing it using ammunition components, which is a little bit of a different exercise.
Okay. Just following your illustration of the muddy shoe print, are you saying that if you were to look at a muddy shoe print on the floor and see that it was a smaller size, you may eliminate that, oh, it was an adult that contributed to this footprint because it's too small to be an adult shoe, something like that?
Correct.
All right. And then if you have multiple children in your household, are you saying you could look at the pattern of the muddy footprint and say, if my son wears Converse, but my daughter wears Reeboks, that you could eliminate one just based on the patterns you see in mud?
Right, and you're using patterns that are common to other Converse shoes out there. You aren't linking it to one particular shoe, but you're able to sort out this list of limited substitutes.
So if you have 3 kids and 2 of them were Converse and 1 of them wore Reeboks, you could eliminate the Reebok, but you wouldn't be able to distinguish between the 2 Converse. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right, you've narrowed it to 2 potential culprits and eliminated one.
Okay. Let's go on to talking about caliber with cartridges.
Okay, so caliber is another term that people pick up from movies and TV, but it has a specific meaning. So if you were to pick up a flashlight in an aisle of a store and a battery in another aisle, you're going to select the proper compatible items based on that size system. For instance, you're going to pick a AA battery. It allows you to match up the right battery with the right flashlight. Caliber is a similar system for ammunition. It's a matchmaking system that allows us to put the right ammunition into the right type of firearm. So saying a gun is of a particular caliber is like saying a battery is of a AA size.
Okay. Going on, are there common calibers that you see in your laboratory?
Yes, there are hundreds in existence, but most of the work that we actually see day to day will come from a relatively small grouping, maybe 20 to 2 dozen different calibers.
Hi, Nick. How you doing, buddy? Hope you're doing well.
Talk about caliber, and talk about type. What do you mean when you say type in a type and caliber analysis?
Right, so it's kind of a vague term, but what we mean by type is that
And once again, chat, I mean, this is just dragging on, but I'm just watching. Like, this is good stuff. Very well done. I'm very impressed with this guy's knowledge.
even when we're looking at these marks, even very simple implements like that fountain pin are very carefully designed. That specific design may be common to a group of firearms. So by examining the imprint of particular features, we can begin to associate a mark with a group of firearm brands, which we know to produce similar implements.
Can you describe the different, well, describe first what a class characteristic is and then what the different class characteristics are. You're talking about cartridge cases.
So a class characteristic is a feature which is going to be common not just to one item, but to a class or a group of items of a similar design. So a particular shape of firearm pin may be common to firearm brands X, Y, and Z. This group of X, Y, and Z is a smaller, more restricted group of the potential brands out there. When we do a type and caliber analysis, we're using these features. We call them class characteristics. When looking at a cartridge case, some of the most important class characteristics will be the caliber, the shape of that firing pin aperture, as well as the shape of the firing pin itself.
Then again, the aperture is the hole that's in the breech face, correct?
Yes, it's like the donut hole in that breech face, and the actual shape can be impressed onto the discharge cartridge case.
And the firing pin is the piece that strikes the primer that, as it strikes it, it also leaves an imprint of the shape of the firing pin?
That's good.
Okay. Can you talk about the class characteristics you see up here?
So this is just sort of illustrating that process of narrowing our candidates. So we begin with the caliber at the bottom left. This is just an image of a cartridge from the laboratory. You'll see at the center that circle is the primer, and you'll see writing impressed in the outside of the primer. That's called a headstand. It's placed there by the cartridge manufacturer. And simply by reading this headstand, also comparing the basic dimensions of that cartridge case, we can determine the caliber of the cartridge. So this particular one is a caliber called 9mm Luger.
Okay, the next class characteristic?
Again, to describe that hypothetical firing pin aperture, this is a laboratory gun. We're looking at that breech face. The dark circle in the center is that hole, the firing pin aperture. The firing pin is going to protrude from that hole upon discharge. And the shape of that hole may vary. Some of the shapes that we commonly run into would be round, which is pretty generic. A rectangular shape, or sometimes even a teardrop shaped aperture.
Now, when you talk about caliber, to the right of the word caliber there's 5 boxes that each have a number in some letters below it. Are those common calibers of cartridge cases that you see?
Right, so this is just illustrating a hypothetical, but these are 5 different common calibers. They usually have a very specific name that can be shortened and placed onto a cartridge headstand.
So a fire cartridge that you'll see will have a caliber associated to it, correct?
Yes.
And then it will have the aperture shape, which will be, is more than likely to be one of those 3 shapes that you have listed up there, correct?
Very common, yes.
Okay. Sorry. Can you describe what you're showing with this next illustration when it comes to the aperture case?
Yes, so at the bottom of this illustration, we have images of 3 different cartridge cases, and these have accepted that imprint of the aperture shape. So at the right-hand side of that image, you'll see a dotted line outlining a circular aperture. In the center, the dotted line is outlining that rectangular shape aperture. And at the left side of the image, you'll see the dotted line that's actually the teardrop-shaped configuration. So these are just examples of the different shapes that we'll be assessing.
And each one of those 3 is a different example, just showing the different shapes that you can see in 3 different guns, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The last class characteristic you talked about was the firing pin shape. Can you describe that to the jury?
Sure. In the bottom right, this is actually a magnified image of a firing pin. It's about the size of the typical ballpoint pen. This particular one is round or hemispherical. It's a very common shape of a firing pin. That round outline will then be imprinted into the cartridge that firing pin discharges. Again, there are different types that are commonly found to be manufactured by different brands. These again would be round, rectangular, and teardrop shape. The aperture and firing pin shape do not have to match. So these different combinations give different classes their distinctive features.
So I just want to put a finer point on that. Just because
We'll come back to this in a second. This is a good question.
Firearm is round does not necessarily mean that the firing pin itself is also round. It can be a different shape.
Correct. It's up to the manufacturer, and they can combine those as they see fit.
Okay. All right. And then do you have examples of what those different firing pins looks like when you look at them in the laboratory?
Yes. So these are the same images. Here at the center, you'll see a depressed area that is then outlined with a solid yellow shape. So on the right side, you'll see that the outline of the actual firing pin that was pressed into the surface is round. In the center, it is rectangular. We may also call this elliptical. And on the left-hand side is a more distinctive shape, that actual teardrop shape that can be caused by the firing pin itself.
Okay. Now you said you actually did an examination in this case of 2 fired cartridge cases, correct?
Correct.
When you are assigned to do this type of analysis, a type and caliber analysis on fired cartridge cases, what's the first step that you take in the laboratory?
First step is to obtain the evidence. It's going to be actually stored with a property system. I'll go check out that evidence, bring it up, log it into our computer system, and perform an inventory of the evidence package.
In order to check the item out of evidence property, how is it that you do that? Is there some number associated with it?
Yes, each investigation at LAPD receives a number. This has been called, for most of my career, a DR number. I think it means Division of Records number. This is simply a number that identifies a particular investigation. Evidence that's collected associated with that investigation will be filed under that DR.
In this case, was the DR number 2106-18784?
May I refer my notes?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, 2106-18783.
All right. When you went to property division, did you obtain the envelope that we see here that was previously marked equals 32? And let me freeze that up there. Bring it to you if you need to inspect the envelope yourself. Okay.
Yes, this is the envelope that I received.
Okay, and how is it that you recall that this was a specific envelope you received?
It bears the DR number as well as the number 1, meaning it is item number 1 booked to that DR number. On the back side of the envelope, it has my initials, my stylized initials, my serial number, as well as the date that I opened the package.
Okay, see it? What I have frozen up on the screen there is that the front side of the envelope.
Proper evidence
Yes.
control. We're doing the right things.
In the back side, are these the initials that you were referring to?
Yes.
All right. Get out the smaller envelope. I'm going to show you the back side of the smaller envelope. You need to approach because the tape's screen, let me know, but did you receive this smaller envelope as well when you did your examination?
Yes, it bears my stylized initials and information.
Are they up here just below the tape?
Yes, that's where I mark the envelope when I open it.
Okay. Then lastly, we take the 2 items out of the smaller envelope. Here. approach with these, you would you tell us that these are fired cartridge cases that you examined in this case?
Yes, their external features match the features that I documented. And there are also engravings on the inside of the actual cartridge case. When I receive evidence, I will engrave it with the item number, portion of that DR number, my initials, and serial number inside the mouth of the case where it will not obscure.
So that you know later they're the same ones you had.
Yes.
Okay, remember them back. Smaller envelope. That in the larger envelope are people's 32. So after you received that envelope and those specific cartridge cases, what's the next step that you take in your examination process?
So the next step is going to be filling out some worksheets with the basic observations and features that are observable on those items. Both of these were booked as item 1, so I did designate one of the two as item 1A, the other as 1B. Then I documented the material and general features that we will systematically do in the opening stages of an examination.
Okay, and then the next step after documentation would you?
So that point would just be to sort of classify those actual markings that were observed, the aperture shape, the firing pin shape, and these are just outlined in preparation for the interpretation part of the actual analysis.
Okay, so you talked about in your prior testimony looking for those 3 class characteristics: the aperture shape, the firing pin shape, and the caliber, correct?
Yes, among others, but these are the most prominent and useful.
Okay. So is that what you're talking about when you look at them in the laboratory? You're documenting each one of those class characteristics.
Yes.
All right, so please go back to your presentation here. Now you're going to start talking about the specifics of this case, correct?
Correct.
All right. Let's start with slide 40. Can you describe for the jury what we see here?
Yes. So the photo at the right side of this this slide is a digital image that is from the computer database system. It's called NIBIN, N-I-B-I-N. This was taken before my actual analysis, but it's a good depiction of what I was looking at. In this picture, I've got the numbers 1, 2, and 3 there. So first, I've categorized the actual caliber. It is a 9-Luger caliber cartridge. Looking at the imprint on this of the aperture, I classified that as teardrop shaped. Looking closer into that actual impression in the primer, I classified the shape of the firing pin as also being teardrop shaped. So in the bottom left, there's a simple diagram outlining those features that I took.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next area. If you would describe sort of the value of the class characteristics that you observed, that information you just talked about.
Right. So now I'm beginning the interpretation stage of the examination. That first stage, here illustrated on the first line next to the one, is the determination of caliber. That was 9mm leader. This is very common in our lab. It's the most common caliber that we run into. So while that is interesting, it narrows our pool of candidate firearms to some extent. It's still a very common feature. Down at line 2, I'm then going to move to begin to interpret what does the teardrop shaped aperture mean. How does that allow me to further restrict the list of candidate sources?
Okay. Let's move on then. You would talk about after you document those 3 features, those 3 class characteristics. What's the next step that you took?
So at this stage, it becomes a bit of a research project. I'm using literature from my field in order to get the broadest list of known candidate sources with a teardrop-shaped firing pin aperture. The left side here is depicted just a couple of articles that I used. These are from the Journal of the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. This is a peer-reviewed journal that's been in print since 1968, I believe. A few of these articles started me down that path. There is also an electronic forum that's operated by APTI. It's available to APTI members, AFTE, Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. This is an electronic exchange for professional examiners in a members area of the APTI website. It allows them to interact, exchange information about new observations that they have a casework. And this is more responsive than the actual articles. We can disseminate information quicker by those means.
And these were the sources you used to kind of determine how big the pool was of potential candidates to compare to those 3 features.
Correct. I'm just looking for a list of suspect guns, if you will, brands which we know to include just that one feature, the teardrop shaped firing pin aperture.
Okay. So it's specific to the firing pin aperture.
Correct.
All right, let's move on. What was the next step you took?
The next resource I used is called the Class Characteristics Matrix. This is a developing database, also operated by APRocky. It allows me to just, you may enter different features, such as caliber and firing pin aperture shape. I did so in order to try to broaden that list of potential makes known to the community to produce teardrop-shaped firing pin apertures.
Okay, after looking at those resources, what did you determine was the potential list of firearm manufacturers that could have contributed to that aperture shape?
Right, so from all the manufacturers operating, the list that is known to me as a result of consulting these sources comes down to just a list of about 5 different manufacturers. So we've narrowed that candidate group considerably just using that one feature. These images there are logos or images depicting those 5 sources.
Okay, so you went from 9mm, very common source, to now whittling it down to 5 manufacturers, just with the aperture shape, correct?
That's right.
Okay. If you would talk about the kind of next step in your research project.
So moving from the aperture now to the actual firing pin. At this point, it becomes a little more challenging because the firing pin that I'm looking at in this case just happens to be quite distinctive. Fortunately, several months before the occurrence date of this case, I initiated a project where I collected samples from firearms that were coming through the firearm unit. We regularly test fire pistols that come into LAPD custody to be entered into the NIDN database. I collected 229 different firearms examples, and these are specifically what we call ghost guns. It's a new sort of phenomena of firearms. By examining the samples from those this sample set, I was able to locate a few species that actually exhibited the fire pin consistent with the one that I observed in this case.
The teardrop shape, correct?
Teardrop shaped fire pin.
Okay. And when you add that class characteristic to your analysis, so now you've gone from caliber, you narrowed out with the aperture shape, and now you've added in those that have the same aperture shape and this unique firing pin shape. What were you left with?
Right, so I'm left with the logo there you see on the left is not an actual manufacturer, it's just representing what we call ghost guns. So there's one particular aftermarket slide, which is common to a particular frame size of ghost gun. That particular product exhibited the firing pin shape that I observed on the evidence. It also has some compatibility with frames that are produced by Glock.
Okay. Before we talk about ghost guns, you mentioned NIDN. Would you describe to the jurors what that is and how you use it specifically in this case?
Sure. We may be more familiar with DNA databases. Samples from a crime scene may go into a database. Samples from suspects will also go into the database. The computer will attempt to match samples and potential suspects. We have a similar database in firearm identification. This is called NIDN, National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So when we have a group of evidence cartridges, such as the ones in this case, we can enter it into the system and attempt to look for potential matches among tens of thousands of candidates that are in that system. At the conclusion of my examination, I took the actual items that were previously imaged into the NIDN system and had them correlated again. This means those images of our evidence were searched against the database again in order to see if I could find any other makes of firearms depicting that particular firing pin shape.
You described using the APRocky resources or the resources from your association of other tool mark examiners. Would NIDN essentially have been kind of like a double check to your research that you did on the APRocky resources?
Right, so the APRocky resources, I'm trying to expand my list of possible candidates. I expanded that list, and those resources also told me what types of fire pins I expected to see. I didn't just take that at face value. I went, looked through NIDN in order to attempt to confirm whether those resources were accurate. According to the samples that I looked at on this database, they were as advertised or published in those resources. Finally, I used NIDN again as a second sort of double check, putting our actual evidence in and seeing if there are any other brands I'm unaware of that had similar marks.
Now let's talk about ghost guns. You used that term a couple times. If you would describe what a ghost gun is.
Sure. Well,
It's
this slide sort of
spooky, Chad.
depicts the, I guess, mainstream way of manufacturing and distributing firearms. So they're typically made by a licensed manufacturer. shipped to a retailer that has a federal firearms license, and they're sold to us in public from that retailer. So that is how typical guns are distributed. I say guns of typical manufacturer as opposed to the species that are commonly referred to as ghost guns.
Okay, move on to that. Can you describe what you are illustrating here?
Right, so the ghost gun species uses a frame, that is the portion you're going to grip. This is the part that needs to be serialized and controlled if it is manufactured and shipped to you by the consumer. Ghost guns use a product that is an incomplete frame. It requires you as the consumer to make just a few adjustments, drill a few holes in order to make that frame operational. You can order these over the internet. You can also order what's depicted there. The frame here is in that pink color. You're also going to need the other firearm components, such as the slide and the barrel. These can also be ordered online. Then, using simple hand tools, as most of us would have in our garage, these aftermarket parts can be assembled and to produce a functional gun. Now, this gun does not have a serial number in that state, because when it was shipped, when the frame was shipped from that manufacturer, it was shipped in an unfinished condition, which did not require it to have a serial number. This is where the term ghost gun, I think, has taken hold, because it does not have that serial number that's known to law enforcement.
You talked about three parts of the gun, and you said the pink part that you have illustrated up there is the frame. What are the other two parts? The gray rectangular shape on the top and the kind of orangish cylindrical piece underneath the pink part.
These are the main other components. Okay, so the pink part is that frame. That orange tubular shaped item is the barrel. That is where you load the cartridge, and that's where the bullets actually going to travel, go towards the target. The gray object at the top of this image, that's the slide. It contains the breech face and the mechanism associated with the firing pin. Marks on the cartridge case are primarily coming from that component, the slide component of the firearm.
And are you illustrating that you can essentially purchase these individual pieces separately? So you could just buy a frame, you just wanted the frame?
Correct. You could buy the kit that can be used to produce a frame, and then the other components can be purchased separately from various retailers.
Okay. If you already have a working firearm, but you want to exchange a piece like the slide for the frame, can you do that by removing a piece and then adding an aftermarket piece?
Yes, you can. Just like my car has a license plate, it's licensed. I can change the rims on my car. I can buy aftermarket ones and slap it on there. That's what we're essentially allowed to do with these components of the gun outside of the frame itself.
Okay. I think you already described that it can be assembled using hand tools. What are you illustrating here in slide number 5?
So this just illustrates a couple of actual products that are out there for privately made firearms is one of the terms the slang is given. These products show some tooling that can be used to actually complete the manufacture and make the kit, which is sold into a functional frame that can be joined with a aftermarket slide and used as fire.
You said there's two brands that are illustrated up there. What are the two brands?
These are two very common brands. One is at the bottom center is Polymer 80 with the P80 logo. There is another brand, the firearm is marketed as an SS80, and that's depicted in the top right portion of the slide.
Okay. All right, moving on. Could you discuss kind of the manufacturer, the features of some of these ghost guns?
Right, so this image is depicting the fact that these kits are produced to mimic a typical gun that's already in mainstream production.
I think it's supposed to end by Monday, chat. That's a good question. This, though, I mean, arguing it was a ghost gun, I don't know where that gets you, because it could be any gun that uses Glock components. So it's literally a gajillion fucking guns. Glock pattern. It could be something from PSA.
So there are two actual models here that are listed there. On the left-hand side, there's a SS80 is one. There's a PF9SS. That's another. These two particular ghost gun frames are compatible with a particular model of Glock, and that Glock is called a Glock 43. So they are made to be sort of imitation frames of that Glock, and they're compatible with those aftermarket parts which are also compatible with that particular model of mainstream manufactured Glock.
So when you were first explaining to us how kind of the origins of what a ghost gun is, you contrasted that to a gun that came from a licensed manufacturer. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Would the Glock 43 be produced by the Glock Firearm Company? Would that be what you're talking about as being produced by a mainstream licensed manufacturer?
Yes,
And the ones that you have listed here on the left, the Polymer 80 BF9SS and the Glock Sword SS80, would those be the ghost gun versions of a Glock 43?
correct. These are the privately made firearm or ghost gun versions of the frame of a Glock 43.
Made to mimic a Glock 43?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What are you illustrating here?
So here it showed one set of aftermarket parts just illustrated there. The markings I found on these evidence items can be linked to a particular aftermarket slide. This particular aftermarket slide is known to be compatible with a few models of firearm frames. These include the Glock 43, 43X, the left-hand side that's depicted by that dark black colored frame. On the right-hand side, the pink frame is representing the ghost gun equivalents of that Glock frame, which may be marketed as the SS80 or PF9SS.
In your explanation just now, you said the evidence items that you examined. Are you talking about these cartridge cases that were item 1 in that exhibit People's 32?
That's it.
Okay, and you're saying that the class characteristics that you saw on these cartridge cases, those 3 characteristics, that was 9mm, that it had a teardrop-shaped aperture and a teardrop-shaped firing pin impression, those are the characteristics you were using to narrow it down to these 4 types of firearms?
Yes, that grouping of class characteristics is known to me through those resources. I've only been able to associate it with this one particular aftermarket slide. And this aftermarket slide is compatible just with a few styles of guns. The known brands and models are listed there.
Those 4, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your finding, which is included to your analysis. Have you summarized your conclusion on this slide, People's 59? Go back to.
Yes. Final conclusion. What you're not going to find in the report, I'm not saying this configuration only comes from brand X. What we know is that after some considerable research, I can give you the list of candidates that we know to be consistent with these items. While these are consistent, we cannot really say that these are the only ones which will ever be manufactured with those general features. Due to that, the qualifying term, but not limited to, always appears in type and caliber findings, such as the ones I've used.
So why, again, you put that qualifying statement in your analysis? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you stated 9mm is a very common caliber, correct?
Yes.
But at the end of your type and caliber analysis, you really narrowed it down to those 3 features were only really typical of 4 different firearms that you have seen come through your laboratory, through your research on the resources and cross-comparing that with NIBIN. Am I saying that accurately?
Yes. Based on the research that I've described, I've only encountered empirical evidence showing me that this grouping of class characteristics exists as a consequence of that particular aftermarket slide. That's all the information that I could determine after some relatively considerable evidence.
But you don't limit it to just those 4 firearms, fair to say?
Correct. You can't state that it's those 4 and only those 4, because these class characteristics are voluntarily chosen by the manufacturers. They can change. It's also possible that there are other items out there that we have not run into. Any research material I use is finite. So for that reason, we include that qualifying mark to be overt.
But after your research in this area, you narrowed it to 4 that you, those 4 different firearms were the only that you could find that had those 3 class characteristics among them, correct?
Objection has answered.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's correct. I'm only aware of the aftermarket product that's compatible with those 4 models.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right, we'll take a 15-minute break, folks. Please be outside before the doors.
I mean, he's making an argument consistent with those. So I mean, we're not getting complete garbage here, but this is borderline. Yeah, there's some problems here. There's some problems here. I don't know. I has to do is where the Glock 43 isn't on the handgun roster. Well, there's that too. I think they're going to get to that. We'll see. Yeah, just a few of every, if a few is every Gen 3 Glock clone. And that, guys, the 3rd generation Glock clone is a gun that everybody copies now in some way, shape, or form because all the intellectual properties have expired on it. It's basically like an open source gun at this point. So, like, Palmetto State Armory makes one. Everybody's making a fucking Glock nowadays. Ruger's making a Glock. Everybody's making a Glock. So, there's a million fucking guns that have Glock firing pins and components. So, yeah, it'll be interesting here about what happens. Jesus Levy says, I'm deeply troubled by the AM into the gun firing. Well, I think Cat Williams, hi Cat, gifting 5 subs. Grays, your days are numbered, chat. If you're in the Grays, days are numbered. Cat's coming to claim your souls. Falconov says he was given the casings evidence. He did not find it as part of an investigation. So is evidence is circumstantial without the gun being found? No. He's just saying this is consistently come from some sort of Glock type handgun. Typically, these are the markings and indicators of being used by a Glock handgun. That's all he could say. He can't say which type or which one specifically. But yeah, I mean, it's circumstantial. It's just saying that this was a Glock handgun, fired, then extracted this cartridge. And the Jesus loves you real quick says, "Dis my Glock 40. Dis my problem solver right here." I wish we could show that meme, but YouTube will kill us, so we can't. All right, chat. So we're going to take that break, and we're going to catch up here. So we're going to... All right, here we go.
You finalized that report on January 8th.
Here we go.
Mr. Siegel, thank you.
Here we go, chat. Here comes the ass whooping.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Farnham. Good afternoon. You're employed, you said, as an analyst by the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm sorry? You're employed as an analyst at the Los Angeles Police Department. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And specifically, you work as a criminalist in the department's firearms analysis unit?
Yes, I have for 20 years. Technically, my assignment has just recently changed. But yes, I operated as a criminalist in that unit during this examination.
What's your assignment now?
The toxicology laboratory?
Okay. Which obviously has nothing to do with ballistics.
Correct.
Okay. But in your prior role in ballistics, you were asked to examine 2 9mm shell casings that we've been talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you prepared a report containing your opinion regarding that analysis, right?
Correct.
And you finalized that report on January 8th, 2024?
May I refer to the report?
Please.
Thank you. Yes, the technical and administrative reviews were completed on January 8th, 2020.
More than a year ago.
Yes, 1 year ago.
Okay. Are you aware that the report was only provided to defense counsel in us 2 weeks ago on January 23rd of this year?
Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant.
Let me ask you this then. When did you provide your report to either detectives or prosecutors in this case?
Once it was signed off, I would email it to the requesting officer, so that should have occurred in January of last year. I don't know the date that I actually emailed.
Okay. Would it have been signed off on by, let me see if I see the name here, someone with the name as in Parkinson?
Correct.
And who was that?
This is another crim 3 in the criminalist 3 in the fire analysis.
And what's that person's full name?
Amanda Harbison.
Is she a supervisor of yours?
No, she is another technical lead. We have 4 details in the fire analysis unit. She is a criminalist 3 technical lead in one of the other details.
Okay. And she signed off on this report after you on January 8th, 2024?
That's fair.
So it would have been around that time that it was provided to the detectives in this case. Is that fair to say?
Yes, if I had a custom, as soon as I get it back, just go ahead and email it out before I submit the case package for filing.
And you were asked by Mr. Preslomic on direct if you evaluated any actual guns in this case, and you said, no, you did not do that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. You also did not examine those 2 shell casings to specifically determine if they would discharge from any particular magazine. Is that right?
The cartridge cases
Yes.
were not compared for cycling marks to a particular magazine. That's correct.
Okay. And as a criminalist, you're certainly aware that there is, you may reference this now, a forensic evaluation available to determine whether shell casings were fired from a specific magazine. Is that right?
They aren't fired from the magazine. So what we're talking about is a cycling mark. This means just basically based on the fact that a live round can be pushed through the magazine into the gun. It's possible for marks to be distributed onto it without the discharge pressures, but it's not a typical examination that we do on a daily basis.
Right.
I'd like to launch you actually approach.
Your Honor, take the objection.
It goes so forward to the court previously.
You can't say it over court, Your Honor. You can do it. Yeah, this, we did cover this. So this is off limits. I can recall, this is off limits. No, we continue. No. So, in firearms analysis, class characteristics or general features shared by a group of firearms, which are used to try to narrow down possible firearms that could possibly fire a bullet. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And those class characteristics do not identify a specific gun. Is that right?
Correct, as the name sort of implies. They indicate a class, a group of guns that may share a particular feature.
Right. And in contrast, individual characteristics. Why don't you tell us, what are individual characteristics?
So individual characteristics are unintentional flaws that actually are created when the firearm is manufactured. Also, as it wears or corrodes over time. These microscopic flaws are pretty amazing because we can actually take guns off the assembly line and distinguish marks from guns even when they're manufactured one after the other. So these are individual characteristics that we would use in a traditional, I guess.
Chad, I've mentioned this before. Imagine if there was some massive gouge or some major defect in the gun itself, specifically that gun, like somebody took an angle grinder and fucked up the barrel or something like that in the chamber, and there's a big gouge or something like that. Yes, there would be identifiable tool marks individual to that gun. So that's where he's getting to this like specialized individual marks.
Thank you. So based on that, then, is it correct to say that class characteristics place an item within a category, general category, while individual characteristics can uniquely identify a specific item? Is that right?
That is how we intend to use them. Yes, the individual characteristics can be used to form an opinion of common origin, meaning that the examiner is determined, is their opinion they agree because they were fired in the same manner.
Right. And in this case, you didn't look at individual characteristics, right? You just limited your analysis to class characteristics. Is that right?
That's correct. For type and caliber analysis, that's the procedure.
Right. You looked at those class characteristics to try to narrow down the possible firearms that could have possibly fired these two shell cases. Is that right?
We're looking for evidence of known guns that produce similar marks, and we attempt to produce that list because it can be advantageous.
Advantageous how?
It can eliminate whole groups of guns, essentially calibers. There's, as I testified, there's a great number of calibers out there. We can immediately sort of push those off the table as potential sources. At the same time, we can generate a list that may be of interest should a gun of that make come across an investigator's desk. It should sort of let them know that it's possibly useful to pursue additional examination.
And what you just said was that you do this examination to eliminate, in other words, potential sources for the cartridges, right?
The class characteristics will eliminate a great deal of sources out there. Even our most common set of class characteristics are still eliminating huge numbers of guns.
Sure. And the purpose of eliminating those potential sources responsible for possibly firing a shell casing or cartridge is to leave open other potential sources from which those shell casings derive. Is that fair to say?
Could you repeat that? I think I lost it.
Sure. You're eliminating potential sources for the shell casings, right?
Sources that are apples and oranges don't have the same class characteristics, they will be eliminated.
So that's my question is correct. Yes.
That's right.
Okay. And the reason you're eliminating those potential sources is to leave open the possibility of other potential sources from which the shell casings came.
Yeah, logically, that's correct.
Right. Okay. Now, what you did was that you looked at the shell casings and you determined that they exhibited these general class characteristics, the ones you called them. Is that right?
Yes, there are cartridge cases. I don't think we're going to mistake what you mean, but yes.
Okay. You understand that when I'm referring to shell casings, what they've been referred to throughout this trial, I'm referring to the cartridge cases. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. It is okay if I continue to refer to the shell cases?
Please, I don't think it creates a misunderstanding.
Thank you. And you determined that the class characteristics that you saw were consistent with having been, the shell casings discharged from a number of different aftermarket firearm types. Is that right?
They are known to have come from a particular style of aftermarket slide, made for a particular size frame.
Well, in your report,
But that's
you noted that the shell casings, this is page 1, exhibit
I don't see how you're gonna make that
characteristics
clean, man.
typical of aftermarket slides for a series of subcompact pistol frames. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. And then you identified a number of potential frames that were consistent with the characteristics that you saw. Is that right?
The frames don't create characteristics. So the frames are compatible with the slides, which I know to be consistent with the characteristics.
Appreciate you saying that. Thank you for clearing that up. And to be clear then, you're not comparing the characteristics with firearms themselves. It's the aftermarket firearm slides that you're using for comparison purposes. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, one more time.
Sure. You're looking at these class characteristics and determining that they are consistent not with actual firearms themselves, but with the particular part of firearm, the aftermarket firearm slide. Is that right?
The slide of the gun is where these marks originate.
Right.
So that's what we can associate or evaluate.
Right. I think you just clarified, not the frame itself, but the slide that goes on top of the frame.
Yeah, that's effective.
And in particular, with regard to the class characteristics, you observed that the shell casings in this case have a teardrop shaped firing pin aperture. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the firing pin aperture you saw this, and it's really sort of just it's a hole in the breech face of the slide where that firing pin passes through. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And you also observed that the shell casings have a firing pin impression, which is also shaped like a teardrop. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said that the firing pin impression also has a metal injection mold seam. Is that right?
It appears to have a linear mark that we associate with that particular manufacturing process. Yes.
Okay. And just dealing with that first, and the metal injection mold, and that's simply just a line left in the firing pin for the manufacturing process. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And the firing pin impression, you spoke of this, that's just a mark that's left on the primer, the fire cartridge, when the firing pin strikes in the back, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, after making your observations of the shell casings, you searched this various databases for categories of I guess, firearm slides that exhibit those general characteristics. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And in particular, you searched what is the APRocky website, class characteristic matrix, that's called?
The class characteristic matrix, yes, is a search tool on that website.
Okay. And the APRocky AFTA, that's just the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. Right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, you look at that database, or rather, you look at, in addition to the APRocky database, you look at the database within the Open Firearms Analysis Unit, and that's the NITE, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And in addition to those databases, you also searched the Firearms Analysis Units, your own units, those gun collection of 229 discharge cartridges, is that right?
Yes, cartridge cases. Correct.
Now, you can so after conducting a search in the databases and making your observations, you rendered the opinion that the class characteristics that you observed on the two shell casings were seen in certain aftermarket slides for firearms frames, firearm frames, which included the Polymer 80 model PF9SS. Is that what
That is.
the Black Sword model SS80? Is that right?
Yes.
The Black model 43, right?
Correct.
And the Black model 43S. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, is it fair to say that this process that you talked about, looking at firing pin apertures, firing pin impressions, and determining whether they look like, in this case, teardrops or D shapes or semicircles, it involves some level of subjectivity?
Yes.
Right. And in fact, that's why sometimes multiple people have to make determinations regarding how a firing pin impression or firing pin aperture should be characterized, right?
No.
No. Okay. So in determining whether or not, you said this, determining whether the firing pin impression or the aperture looks like one type of shape or another, if it fits into a hemisphere, I think that's one type of shape, one type of firing pin aperture, right? Hemisphere, is that one?
Hemispherical is a more accurate term for something I just called round.
Round. Okay. Is there a semi-hemisphere?
I don't know that term. No, there's one that is sort of a modified hemispherical shape that has sort of a beveled edge on one side, but it's not really called semi-hemispherical. It's been referred to as a D-shaped firing pin.
Okay. But in making the assessment, as you said, because already there is some level of subjectivity.
To looking at shapes.
No, to determining what the shape is, right? In other words, these firing pins aren't standardized, right? You have how many different manufacturers making these firing pins? They're not going to be one particular shape, right?
They all make firing pins, yes.
Right.
And they
Different shapes.
use a range of different shapes.
Right, essentially a broad range of shapes, right?
At least 3.
Okay. And in making the assessment whether or not a firearm is one shape or another, you said this already, there is some level of subjectivity to this, right?
Yes, to looking at shape.
And in that regard, that level of subjectivity doesn't just apply to you, but to the people who enter information in databases that you rely on, right? When they're entering information into the computer system, the same level of subjectivity that would apply to you would apply to them, right?
Sure.
Okay. Now, you identified these 4 pistol frames that would be consistent with the class characteristics that you observed, but you agree that those are not the only ones having aftermarket slides exhibiting the characteristics that you observed, right?
Not exactly. So the marks are known to come from particular size of aftermarket slide. That slide is compatible with these 4 frames that I know. That was what's meant by the report and news.
But your report expressly states that the 2 shell casings exhibit characteristics typical of aftermarket slides for a series of subcompact pistol frames, including, as we saw on the screen there, but not limited to the 4 that you identified, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, your analysis relies on the databases that you use for comparison purposes, correct?
For reference purposes, it's not a side-by-side comparison of marks. Yes.
I understand, but now obviously certain firearm slides, or we just back on this, I want to make sure the record's clear. In order for you to make your rendered opinion, you're relying upon databases, right?
Published information, yes. One database is what I would call that class characteristic matrix. That's a searchable database.
Right. That's the APRocky, correct?
That is housed on the APRocky website. Yeah, it's one of their tools.
Right. And you use that tool to enter in search parameters against the firearm pin aperture of the teardrop shape that you saw, and it generated a list of potential firearms or firearm slides that match that characteristic. Is that right?
That use the same shape.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And you agree that the databases that you look at are still being developed, right?
The class characteristic matrix is definitely a new one. I would call it a developing database. Yes.
And to be clear, the list of firearms generated from your search are not all inclusive of the firearms consistent with these class characteristics that you observed. Is that right?
It can't be considered all inclusive because it's based on finite reference information.
Right.
It includes all the ones that we're aware of. It's possible that always possible there's facts we are unaware of.
Right. And obviously, certain firearm slides or class characteristics are not contained in your databases. They wouldn't be available for reference purposes, right?
Yes.
Right. In fact, you testified on direct that there are other possible items you didn't locate which are compatible with the shell cases, right?
There are other possible items.
Here was. Did you say that on direct?
I don't recall exactly, but you're talking about candidate sources that use this style of class characteristics. Is that what the testimony was about?
It's your testimony. Can you tell me or you don't recall?
I don't know.
Okay. So, would you agree that there are other possible firearm slides or firearms?
Objection to the word possibly, Ron. In the court's private ruling.
Okay. Would you agree that there are other possible or potential, your words,
Potential's a better word.
fine, potential firearm slides or firearms that you did not locate which are compatible with the shell cases?
That's what I attempted to look for. I looked for them because they could be out there.
And if they're not in the database, you would look at them, right?
They're not in the physical exhibits that we have in house. What was great is that I collected those and then 2 years later double checked against all the guns that have come into LAPD custody over that period. And either of those groups that are bookending the actual incident date came back with no other candidates that actually had that firearm.
So when you say you examined them.
So he didn't actually check. It's
You're talking about your collection of those guns. Is that what you're talking about?
to be fair, yes. He's like, well, I only have my reference library, but he just admitted my library is only based on the guns we find.
The exhibits that I collected from the test firing of those guns, the physical exhibits that yes are actually in the laboratory.
Right.
That's one set of data.
Right, that's the 229 ghost guns that you have, right?
Yes.
Okay. How many different makes of aftermarket slides exist?
There are dozens of manufacturers. They are pretty hard to track.
Right. Dozens of manufacturers. Could it be hundreds?
It's possible.
Right. And each of these manufacturers can make how many different aftermarket supplies? Do you know? How many different types?
How many actual units they can produce?
No, types.
Types per manufacturer.
You don't know, do you?
No, they tend not to actually mark these components,
Right.
so it is very difficult to track.
And because you don't know how many different makes of aftermarket slides exist, you would know how many different makes of aftermarket slides specifically have a teardrop firing and aperture and a teardrop shaped firing. You couldn't know this, right?
Again, we treat it as an aggregate brand, okay, because we don't know who's actually making them. I try to cast a wide net and look at all the products I can get my hands on that they've made. And I only was able to find one select species that was congruent with the others.
So based on what you can get your hands on, right?
Based on the intake into the Los Angeles Police Department, as well as that database, which is constantly growing. Correct, the 90 database. It's constantly being fed.
And there's a reason that's still developing, right?
Yeah, I see it. I'm going up.
Information.
The developing one is the class characteristics matrix that is on the website. I call that developing because typically we use a database of bullet rifling, and that's got like 15,000 exhibits in that database. It's been around for decades. That's a pretty robust database. This class characteristics database on that website that applies to cartridge cases is developing. So I use it to broaden candidates I might want to look at, but not as a resource that I would consider all inclusive at this stage.
Now, with regard to these aftermarket slides that have a teardrop firing pin aperture and a teardrop shaped firing pin, how many of them, let me rephrase it, how many firearms are there that are existent right now, types of firearms, that are compatible with aftermarket slides with a teardrop firing pin aperture and a teardrop shaped firing pin? Can you give us a definitive answer?
I can give an approximate based on my experience here in our flow of firearms into the LAPD. Is that
And you would give an approximate answer without knowing all the different types of aftermarket slides that exist. You can give an approximate answer.
I can give an approximate based on how many in this group that we see relative to the total amount of guns that come into you.
Right. But those are only the guns that are logged into your database. If they're not in there, you can't use them for reference purposes, right?
Those are guns that come through NIVAN on a daily basis. So it is part of our daily business. Just to have these guns that are handguns will be input into the system every day.
Would you agree that Glock's a very popular firearm manufacturer?
I would.
Would it make sense if you find many Glocks in your database? Does that,
Yes,
including Glocks with aftermarket slides?
they do come through the unit. Aftermarket slides, sometimes on block frames, overwhelmingly more common on the unserialized frames we call those frames.
Do you have any Glock firearms that exist in the United States now?
Objection relevance.
Block 43s
Glock 43s. Thank you.
in the United States.
Sorry. No. Glock 43Xs? Yeah.
No, in terms of our intake,
No, in the United States, the present. Because your intake doesn't intake every single firearm in the United States. How many exist in the United States? You don't.
I don't in the United States.
Okay. How about the Hollywood 80 model PF9 SS Ghost gun frames? And how many exist in the United States?
No.
How about Glock model SS80 Ghost gun frames? And how many of those exist in the United States?
No.
Now, in addition to the ones we just named, the PF9 SS, the SS80, the Glock 43, and the Glock 43X, your database search revealed other firearms with a teardrop firing pin aperture. Isn't that right?
Yes, as well as the published literature. Yes.
Right, such as a Smith & Wesson, right? Yes. A Mossberg MC1 SC, right?
I'd have to verify that model. It sounds correct. Yes.
Okay. How about the Glock Generation 5 pistols? Did you find that in the search?
For the teardrop shaped firing pin aperture.
Sure.
Not the firing pin.
It's a firing pin aperture.
Yes.
In fact, when you did your search, that was the term that you entered in the query. You were looking specifically for just firing pin apertures with a teardrop, right?
That's for that one particular API class characteristic matrix. That is the only feature that I entered. So that's only going to restrict based on the aperture.
The answer to my question is yes. That's what you're looking for, right?
That's where I wanted to be clear.
Okay, thank you. And you agree that teardrop firing pin aperture is also been found on the Taurus firearm, right?
Yes.
Right. Specifically the Taurus GX4, right?
Again, that model sounds correct. I can check my notes.
You want to so it's on page 8 of your report, if you want to see it.
Yes, I'll return to page 1 of my case package.
It's the fifth result on page.
Yes, the Taurus model with the teardrop aperture that I'm aware of is a model GX4.
Now, as you said, you observed on the 2 shell casings this teardrop-shaped firing pin impression. Is that right?
That's right.
And you agree that the Glock 43 exhibits class characteristics which include a D-shaped firing pin impression, right?
Yes,
Likewise, the Glock 43X exhibits class characteristics which include a D-shaped firing pin impression, right?
the Glock manufactured slides. That's correct. They have a different shape firing pin impression than the one that I observed.
Right. The teardrop shape is distinct from the D shape.
Yes, very much so.
So to be clear, the Glock 43 and the Glock 43X do not depict teardrop firing pin impressions that are even remotely similar to the shell casings that you examined. Is that right?
That's correct. It is the aftermarket slide, which is compatible with those two frames that you just listed.
Right. Not the
That
Glock 43.
aftermarket slide does produce those ones.
Right. But you didn't connect it to a Glock 43 or Glock 43X that you said are typically sold here in the United States, right?
That's correct. The standard manufactured blocks don't match.
Okay. So in other words, the shell casings you recovered are inconsistent with the class characteristics of Glock 43 and Glock 43X firearms, right?
The slides manufactured by Glock and sold. That is the part that does not match. The slides that are aftermarket, which are consistent, are compatible with the Glock 43 and the Glock 43X.
And the slides that are sold by Glock for the 43 and 43X are not compatible, right? The Glocks themselves, I'm not talking about aftermarket slides. I'm talking about Glock. You go to the store, you want to buy a Glock that's sold from Glock. Glock 43, Glock 43X. It's not your those shell casings did not come from the Glock 43 or 43X, did they?
They did not come from a slide that's manufactured by Glock,
That's what I'm asking.
such as I'm aware of.
Thank you.
When I say compatible,
Mhm.
we're talking about the compatibility of a slide and the frame. So the frame is manufactured by Glock, the slide manufactured by Glock, they're compatible, they can work together. The slide
Oh, wow, guys, sorry, I had to step away for a second. Court TV, hello. Thanks for being here. Much appreciated. Yeah, I know I was missing. I had to take care of something. So 2.0, I had to take care of something for a lovely 2.0. Oh, Vinny's doing his show right now. Nice. But yeah, thanks for being here, Court TV. I appreciate it. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, yeah, today was very slow, but you know, even for somebody who's a big gun guy, this has been really awful, but the defense is doing a great job. You could say, like, you don't know what gun this is, how this worked. They have a lot of problems here. So I think there's a lot of problems. Court TV took over your channel. This is never a lost show. So, but yeah, thank you for stopping by. I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. So, you had to run in and take care of something. So, but yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. It's nice to be noticed. Anyways, let's finish this up, chat. How much time do we got? Oh, we got 20 minutes. Yeah, we're going to get this done, chat, but we're going to run right into the show, but we'll finish this up tonight.
manufactured by Glock, which does not, however, produce these models. Sorry.
And for that matter, most of the Polymer 80 model PF9SS and Glockster model SS80 samples that you looked at in your post-gun collection exhibited a D-shaped
By the way, Court TV, tell Vinny I said hi.
firing pin. Is that right?
Yes, it's a smaller group of those ghost guns that actually have this particular slide in my collection.
And in fact, in your collection, there's 229 ghost guns, only 2 Glockster model SS80 samples exhibited both the teardrop firing pin aperture and the teardrop firing pin impression. Only 2 of them, right?
Yes, it's rare.
So most of the PF9SS and SS80 ghost gun samples that you looked at were not consistent with class characteristics you observed in the shell cases, right?
Yes, that's correct.
By the way, despite your analysis, just so it's clear, throw that. This is error. The same marks that you observed and testified on the 2 FC 9mm shell cases could have been made at a higher range, right?
Yes, I don't know where they were just.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, before you do that, let me see you all. I have a question that I want to ask all. Initially,
That is a phenomenal way to end that. Those could have been produced anywhere, right? Yeah. So where do those cases come from? It could have been anywhere. And notice he got it to the point of, and I'll give them credit, they did their research to figure out which guns would actually have that setup, and he said it's only 2 possible. And notice that, and I'm sure Takapina is going to bring this up. there was never any work by the detectives to find out if Rocky bought a polymer 80 gun, because you could, I think at the time you could still have those in California, but they never went and got polymer 80's records. I know they're out of business now, but they never did any trying to see if he did that or subpoenaing his credit card records or finding out if anybody in the group had a polymer 80 handgun. They haven't done any of that. They haven't done any of that or showed anybody in the group owned a Glock. And I think that's an issue for them. I think that's an issue. So I think that's going to be a problem here. Anyways, we're going to keep going. Let's see. Judge shut everything off for a minute. Let's see what happens.
No.
Okay. Back to redirect.
See the combination of class characteristics that you saw in this case from any gun that did not have an aftermarket slide?
No.
And I know you said it, but if you can answer what size frame is it that slide would be compatible?
I've seen these marks from an aftermarket slide, which is compatible with a Glock 43, Glock 43X, as well as two ghost gun frames, the SS80 and the PF9SS. These are the frames that I'm aware of.
Are those size frames, the size that's compatible with 43 and 43X, are those common frames that you see in the lab?
They are relatively uncommon.
Can you explain that to the jury?
So based on my background experience, as well as some of the facts and figures that I sort of curate as a trainer in type and caliber with LAPD, I'd be comfortable stating that we see these guns in the flow of guns that come into the unit at a range, we're talking around 1%. Definitely, I'd be very comfortable saying they're in the low single-digit percent range for how often we see them in the flow of guns into our unit.
The class characteristics that you're talking about are you observing shapes on the back of the fire cartridge cases, right?
That is what a class characteristic is, yes.
In counsel's questioning, he asked you if there was subject.
Take care. Have a nice night.
Determination of what the shape is on the back of the cartridge case.
He did.
What is the subjectivity in that determination?
Now, notice, chat, they said 1%. That's not really much. 1%, so it's rare. Because it's fair to call 1% very rare. Interesting.
Anytime we look through a microscope, we look through a telescope, we are perceiving information. This is a standard way of performing science. We will attempt to try and make sure that we are repeatable, reproducible in these observations. We document them very well, take photographs, and at the end of the day, they are in better condition when I'm done than when I started. They can be re-examined again. So there's subjectivity in determining what's a square, what's a circle, for me as well as for my kids. But here in the laboratory, we have procedures that we can use to assure that there's quality results in that subjective determination.
Was that a hard determination for you to make, to determine that the aperture impression on those fire cartridge cases was a teardrop shape?
No.
Was it a difficult determination for you to make to say that the shape of the firing pin impression on those fire cartridge cases was also a teardrop shape?
No.
You have what, 19 years of experience in the firearm analysis unit?
Correct.
Is making that determination something that even a newer analyst could do with relative ease?
I don't think that's fair. He doesn't talk about training people. So how would he know what a brand new person could do? No, well.
It's a basic determination in our first week of cartridge case comparison training. You should be able to do this.
Okay. With the database searches that you've conducted, you said that the class characteristics database on the APRocky website was a developing database, correct?
That's correct.
Is that a national database?
It is.
Used throughout the country?
It's used throughout the country, possibly internationally, and it's been used over the course of my entire career.
A large database?
Yes.
Sure. The last thing I wanted to cover was counsel asked some questions about other guns that were listed in your report or manufacturers that used a teardrop aperture. He specifically mentioned the Mossberg and the Taurus GX4. Are you following what I'm asking about?
Yes.
those were firearms that you observed had the teardrop aperture, correct?
That's correct.
But did those firearms also have the teardrop firing pin impression?
No, the firing pin on those firearms is drastically different.
So can you say that those guns could not have been the guns that fired these cartridge cases because the class characteristics do not match?
We don't perform a one-to-one elimination over just digital images. The class characteristics I see there, if I had those in the laboratory, they would constitute a elimination. They're not from the same source.
Because the shapes are totally different.
That's correct.
Nothing else.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bruder, thank you very much. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, there's no further witnesses from the people subject to the admission or exhibits that you will address.
All right, we'll deal with that tomorrow morning, so the defense should be prepared to present evidence tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Before you leave, I want to mention something to you. You heard Mr. Barima say that he did not do any analysis of the shell casings that were found, or Mr. Ephron said he found. He didn't. Mr. Barima did not do an analysis of those casings to the magazine that was recovered at Mr. Mayers' house about 6 to 7 months later. For legal reasons that do not matter to you, about 2 weeks ago, I advised both sides that an analysis of the casings and the magazines need not be done. Okay? All right, please don't discuss the case amongst yourself or anybody else. Remember, 10 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to resume.
I like
Please
that
keep an open
instruction
mind.
by the
Do not
judge.
look at anything
We're
online.
going to listen to that again, guys. We're going to listen to this again.
Ephron said he found. He didn't. Mr. Barima did not do an analysis of those casings to the magazine that was recovered at Mr. Mayers' house about 6 to 7 months later. For legal reasons that do not matter to you, about 2 weeks ago, I advised both sides that an analysis of the casings and the magazines need not be done. Okay? All right, please don't discuss the case amongst yourself or anybody else.
That's interesting. He brought that up to them. But yeah, the case is over, guys. All right. State's case is over. We start defense tomorrow morning. Yeah, so there's no science done on the actual casings. Yeah. Yep. But yes, we did hit the big time. That was cool. That was cool, chat. It's nice to be noticed. What's wrong? What's up with Clyde? Is he okay? Oh, he's probably outside peeing. Or rolling in pee. So far, guys, that was at first they were trying, the state tried to argue with their examiner, like, oh, there's no other way it could be anything else. Like, but that's not true. It's literally like only 1% of possible guns, and like we're getting into statistical, like the odds of this being the actual thing aren't there. So, once again, this is not helpful to Rocky, but plus this in the magazine look really bad for Rocky. I think he's still got a very good shot about what to do. Yes, a good thing I got a haircut today. I agree. Very good thing I got a haircut today. So, or the defense got Relli's loaner gun from the gun range. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens, guys. Yeah, but this is now getting interesting. This is getting interesting, chat. Maddie, what do you mean they couldn't see it? I don't get what you're saying. So, would you consider going Court TV? Yes, of course I would. And I will say, just because of that, I'll probably start streaming Court TV's thing. Player to player, pimp to pimp, I'll start using Court TV's feeds. We're going to start doing that. So, I'm going to turn to John Cena when I get covered. Yeah. But I would go on there, definitely. So, guys, I don't know. I'm not convinced. Now, I do think this, it's going to be interesting to see what witnesses they have and what evidence they bring up on Rocky's side. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Going to be interesting, chat. I just don't know what's going to happen here. But yeah, I got to say, it's for going forward, though. Yeah, I I will go ahead and use Core TV, and I just appreciate the love there, appreciate the respect. So yeah, guys, I'm not. Is it very likely? Do I think it's very likely Rocky had a real gun that night and started busting shots? Yes. Do I think that they've actually proven that? No. So I had to take care of some stuff, chat. 2.0 had me take care of some things. It'd be hilarious if you use your feeds and they DMCA you. Yeah, but I think at this point now, Law and Crime and Core TV are pretty much past that. They realize this is actually better for them to let people stream and comment. So, yeah, there. So, Timmy Parasol says, this guy's a nobody compared to me. I swapped in a 9mm barrel on my G27 and changed the ejector. I could get a PhD at the Sonoran Desert Institutes. Yeah, that's the thing. While this guy's an expert, to anybody who has the basic understanding of Glock firearms and, has built one of the things up from the ground up, this is like, you could change all these parts in and out without hesitation. So, I just don't see how the state's going to approve this. I will tell you guys, of course, we know the judge is going to deny the directed verdict. We know that's coming, and he's going to say denied and let it keep going. And he's probably going to deny it even then. He's going to let this one right out to the jury. I mean, there is enough circumstantial evidence. I think you'd have to agree. So, not proven to be a better verdict, yeah. I think Relli had somebody who left the Glock magazine there to help Relli get money, never realizing it could mean 20 years. Yeah, but you got to be careful because you're running around with a magazine like that in California. You could be in deep shit. So that just seems a little. Got to be careful with that. The state will prove it because of a dumb jury. Yeah, they'll go, oh, black guys with guns. I mean, really is what's going to happen. This reminds you of in the first season of Yellowstone where Casey and the Rez. Well, it was the BIA police officer. Yeah, they swapped barrels on their Glocks. It is a little like that. So. Yeah, there is. And Luke's saying, hey, Fat Man, there's a lot of not guilties this week. There have been. And we're going to go through those starting next week. So remember, guys, I don't have a trial. We pled out. Got my guy what he looked for. So, yeah. Relli has an Insta story where he has guns in a bag. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Relli's clearly been shown to be a liar, and I think that's the biggest thing that's going to kill the case. Relli is not trustworthy. So, I don't think they're going to have Rocky talk. I don't think Rocky's going to testify. So, I think we'll see Rocky. I think the odds are tilting, but it's still Rocky's behind the 8 ball right now. I'd like to think he'll walk, but he's not looking good. He's still behind the 8 ball. The jury's going to go ahead. I mean, the jury's always going to convict. So we'll see. But yeah, guys, in the meantime, I think we're all set for day 8. We'll do day 9 tomorrow. And we'll probably start a little later because it looks like Nick Starro would like to talk about the case tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So I will be there. Nick Starro Trial Watch at 7 p.m. And then tomorrow at noon, I will be on Laid Back Law with Eric Hunley and friends. And if you guys are new, we are in about 15 minutes starting the Thursday night show. We're going to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun right here, 9:30 Eastern. I'm going to take a break for a couple of minutes and get caught up on stuff, but I will see you guys here very shortly. So I just want to say we have a lot of stuff to talk about. And yeah, that's really it, chat. Thank you for everybody here. Thank you for all the raiders. I appreciate it. Nick and Hella, thank you guys for being here as well. Core TV, thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it. And yes, Angela, I will put in the link in I will put the link here on YouTube, and I will put the link up in locals for everybody. Oh, Nick says just press my name here and the option shows that too. Rowan says no future conflicts tomorrow. No, I got court like first thing in the morning. I got a thing in the morning. Popped up last minute today, so I'm going to take care of that. Skinny said, what are you going to talk about tonight? Well, if you guys go over to it, it'll show you what we're talking about. But we got some interesting things. We got a judge who, he's not like a judge. He's kind of a judge, kind of fucked himself out of his job when he went for jury duty. It's kind of interesting in that regard. There's a couple of interesting Second Amendment cases in the federal court system right now that popped up. And what else? What's the other thing we've got here? There's a couple other ones. We've got some updates on a couple different cases where people doing dumb stuff have caused them to be punished for it in the federal court system, including a guy who flew his drone into one of the firefighting planes in LA. And then what is the other thing here? Sarah Boone. We hear from Sarah Boone very shortly, but it's you can see what's going on there. And then there's some interesting cases. People got arrested in regards to the plane crash in DC. And there's some other stuff that goes on there. And we're going to get to all that, chat. So that's going to be at 9:30, and we'll see you there. Did I see the Alex Jones decision? Yes, but that's Alex Jones gets to keep InfoWars for now. The judge blocks the Sandy Hook settlements, which, you know, you love to see it. You love to see it. So, and we're going to talk about that as well tonight, chat, and we'll see you guys over there. So, in the meantime, just remember, chat, just because you did it, and I think there's a good chance Rocky did do this. He got does not mean you're guilty. It doesn't mean you're guilty, especially with garbage witnesses like Relli. It doesn't mean you're guilty. So, good night, or well, chat. So long for right now, and we'll see you in a couple minutes. Take care, you guys.
Weapons, blacksmithing, and models of planes, esoteric works, and even some trains. Much merriment had while drinking White Claws, tips on hunting, and even talking the law. Whatever you do, just don't talk to cops, even when they nab you on illegal stops. Just 'cause you did it doesn't mean you're guilty, but please talk to a local attorney. Was that the fat guy Rick Hayden yelled at? Why, yes it was.